Good evening, everyone. Kelly Beatty coming to you live from the Chelmsford Senior Center for tonight's coverage on Chelmsford Telemedia of the Springtown Meeting 4th session. This, we hope, will be the 4th and final session of this spring annual town meeting. It has been pretty exciting up to this point. 3 fun-filled nights. Last Monday night, you might recall, we spent the better part of that evening and actually part of Thursday evening before discussing Article 14. This one ought to go down in history for the longest debate on an article. That had to do with the establishment of a stormwater enterprise fund. It involved creating a new kind of revolving fund in town, a fund where money goes in and can only be used for that purpose, and in this case, for the expanded assessment and maintenance of stormwater drains here in town as dictated by the EPA. And it's something that all towns in Massachusetts are going through, at least those of a certain size and greater. And what was unusual to the town meeting representatives was the realization that not only were we establishing this fund, but we had to fund the fund. And as requested by town manager Paul Cohen, the amount was approximately $2 million for equipment purchases to get it, the capital portion, and about another $1.8 million for salaries. Well, that didn't sit well with a lot of the town meeting reps who apparently were caught off guard by this. And at the end, a revised, amended article lowering the amounts to about $1 million in capital expenses and $1 million in operations was finally passed pretty handily after the amendment was passed. So, with that as backdrop, tonight it should be a much more laid-back evening, we hope. There are really only 4 articles left out of the 29 that we started with. The first 2 will be rather interesting because they have to do with establishing local speed limits of an overall 25 mile per hour speed limit in town, and then safety zones that are only 20 miles an hour. Now, apparently these are allowed by Massachusetts state law. Chelmsford seeks to adopt them in our town. And the final two amendments are bylaw amendments having to do first with the Arts and Technology Education Fund, something that was started quite a few years ago and seeks to be extended and expanded, and also one submitted by town moderator John Curlin to do away with the town meeting question and answer period. You've seen a test of that this town meeting. As you recall, there were usually 2 phases after an article was presented. First was question and answer, where reps sought to get answers to questions they didn't understand, aspects they didn't understand, but no debate was allowed. And then debate was allowed, and there was always a lot of confusion surrounding those. So this will do away with the question and answer period, and we'll see how that goes. Now, as I said, the environment is a lot more relaxed this evening. In fact, I can tell you that the attendance here is perhaps a little thinner than it has been in previous meetings. And who could blame the town meeting reps, although there should be showing up here. It has been a pretty grueling 3 nights. We're hoping that tonight will end more quickly with just these 4 warrant articles on the docket for this evening. So we invite you to sit back and enjoy what's left of our annual town meeting. All the budgets have been passed, all the money issues are done and gone. If you've tuned in for those, I'm sorry, you'll be disappointed because the town did pass its annual budget, the school budget, the Neshoba Valley budget, and the capital budget. Those are all done and gone, and we can look forward to being able to cruise into fiscal 2018 with at least those under our belt. So please stand by. We will be bringing you the Pledge of Allegiance and the beginning of town meeting just momentarily. Thank you.
Yes. It's right here. It's right on the last page of the red book. Of the book.
To advance, you know.
I swear. I want to flip them around so that
Point of
the
order.
short ones first.
Majority.
Okay.
So
Some towns have a 2/3 vote requirement.
I thought it was just watching the Tinkerbell Olympics one where they, it's like one for the thumb. And
Good evening. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will now test our voting devices to determine whether we have a quorum. And while we're doing that, two announcements, one of which is the Chelmsford office of the town clerk invites the community to celebrate Municipal Clerks Week with them. Please join them on Wednesday, May 10th at 10 a.m. for Coffee with the Clerk in their office located at 50 Billrica Road, Chelmsford. Celebrate Municipal Clerks Week, May 7th to the 13th. The other thing is that I really, we're going to get done tonight, hopefully, and I really hope that we conduct a respectful meeting. If you don't like someone, that's fine. Keep it to yourself. Argue the points. Don't denigrate anybody. That's what I'm asking, please. And we do have a quorum. So, the first article on the
Mr.
agenda
Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to change the order of the articles.
to take out of order.
Yes.
Okay, and what articles?
Sorry, I'm Ginger Skoog.
You have to
Precinct
identify
6.
yourself
Sorry.
first.
Ginger Skoog, Precinct 6. I'd like to make a motion that we take the articles out of order.
Which article would you want to take out of order?
I would like to do Articles 28 and 29 before we do Articles 23 and 24.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor.
The reason being, those are two shorter items that should pass discussion, I expect will pass discussion much quicker, which gives us a better chance of getting out of here in 4 nights, not 5.
Well, that's fine. So we have a motion to take Articles 28 and 29 first. I believe that's debatable. So does anyone have any discussion, debate? If not, we're all set. So an affirmative vote would be to go straight to 28 and 29 and then go back to 23 and 24.
Obviously, the town meeting reps are anticipating some prolonged discussion about the speed limits.
Thank you.
And so we're offering a chance here to take the last two warrant articles first, getting them out of the way, and therefore paving the way for the last two articles to take however long they might. They're obviously kind of paired. Those speed limit articles are kind of paired in the
Okay,
sense
the
that
motion
they-
passes. So what we're going to
Changes,
do is
in
we're
both.
going to go to Article 28, and this is an article that I have submitted. And even though Town Council has indicated that it would not be a conflict of interest for me to go down there, present the article, and then come back here and preside over it, I feel that for the sake of just so there's no question of impartiality, I'm going to ask town meeting to vote to appoint Michael McCall as the temporary moderator for this article only. So can we have a... Thank you. Okay. Why don't we just raise chits? Everyone in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. I just want to show. Yeah. And Mike, here's my little cheat sheet. So it's the proponent, yes, FinCom, Selectmen, and then discussion.
Good evening, and again, thank you for allowing me to serve as your temporary moderator. At this time, I would ask the proponent to come to the microphone and explain the article.
Thank you very much, Mr. Temporary Moderator. Article 28 is my article. In the past, we tried last fall to change our procedure so that we wouldn't have a separate question and answer period. We are one of the few towns that does. And I thought that it might speed town meeting along. It worked well in the fall. It worked mostly very well this session. And I'm just, in order for us to make this we have to vote to change the town meeting bylaws. And I'm asking you to please vote to remove the specific provision that requires a separate question and answer period. You will always have your opportunity to ask questions, but we will just move to inquiry and debate under that. So thank you.
At this time, I would ask if there's a recommendation from the Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 28.
And the Board of Selectmen, is there a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen recommends approval by a vote of 4-1.
Thank you. At this time, I would open it up to the body for discussion. Mr. Latina.
Brian Latina, Precinct 4. I move the question is a very powerful statement to make that stops discussion, that doesn't allow answers, and it's supposed to be voted on by this body. I was part of the MARCOM committee in 2014. That was an elected committee from each precinct. One member of each precinct was elected to go to the town moderator and look at our bylaws and our procedures after there was some problem by having 2 microphones put up at the decision of just one person. We had other issues with our town meeting and the flow, and we wanted to speed it up. But the committee had a pretty long discussion, as I recall, and we came back to town meeting, and the recommendation was to continue allowing this question and answer period. And part of that discussion was because it allowed us an unmolested question and answer period where we were supposed to be asking why, what, numbers, and those sorts of things without risk of the debate stopping at the beginning. Had I made this statement at the beginning and you voted on it because it was late, we might not have heard some good questions. We might not have had an opportunity for different town meeting members to come up and ask. It was limited. The rules of the committee recommended the town moderator to amend, and I'm reading what you voted on. This body did vote on these MARCOM committee rules, and we accepted it. And now we're changing it. And it said that each person in line may ask a reasonable number of questions with the possible follow-up of each question when given permission to do so by the moderator. Again, it was unique to Chelmsford, pretty much. I think the current town moderator and our temporary one, who was also on the committee, as I recall, know that it's unique to Chelmsford. But it protects you from just moving the question. And it was something that we discussed at some length of time. So I don't think it speeds up the discussion. And then another comment I have, at the beginning of this town meeting on a Monday night, there was no motion that I heard, and Mr. Moderator, please correct me if I'm wrong, only town meeting members can make a motion, but we waived our question and answer period without a motion. And then we went and we changed the rules. We basically held our tickets up and said, okay, no discussion, and we waived our tickets. That's also not allowed. We're supposed to use the electronic device so that our people that we represent can see how we voted. So there are little nuances that happen during town meeting that you can look at, but we ought to follow the rules. And this is a good one. I think question and answer by the body when you don't know the answer is a good idea. And then we can debate a shorter amount of time at the end. So I'm going to vote no on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Merrill?
Laura Merrill, Precinct 2. Through you to the presenter, I have a few questions regarding this article. Right now, I believe we have, with the current rules, residents are allowed to speak during the debate period, but not during question and answer period. So will residents be able to ask questions as well?
Residents can ask questions. They can even engage in debate. They just cannot vote.
Okay.
So this would not affect them at all. I certainly want to encourage participation by everyone in our town.
Okay. Will speakers need to refrain from asking rhetorical questions if it's part of their debate narrative? Because part of what I've noticed is a lot of times a speaker will start a speech and then they're interrupted because of a technicality of it. So will rhetorical questions be allowed in speeches?
Rhetorical questions are never allowed. They are never allowed.
So I can't, a lawyer doesn't ask questions ever when they're presenting an argument?
No, no.
And then
If
continue on with the
you're
argument?
asking a legitimate question, then it's not a rhetorical question. If you're asking a question as an argumentative question, that's you can always ask questions, but it's generally who, what, when, where, or why. It's not, isn't it true that you beat your wife? I mean, we don't allow those questions.
Okay, thank you. Will speakers be able to stand for the 5 minutes, or is there?
No, I've made it very clear at the beginning on Monday, well, now it's almost 2 weeks ago, that your question and answer does not count towards your 5 minutes of discussion. So you could ask your questions, and then you could discuss, just like Mr. Latina just did. He didn't ask questions, but you certainly could make your argument right now.
Okay, thank you. And would you consider eliminating the consent agenda if we move forward with this?
That is not part of this motion. And this board has voted every time to have the consent agenda. So it's their town meeting, it's not mine. I'm just trying to expedite things.
Okay. The Marcom group that the previous speaker brought up, were you on that committee?
No, and I wasn't moderator at the time either.
Okay, thank you. And how many years ago was that we voted on this version of this?
4?
Was it that long ago? It seems
Yes.
like it was just more recently. Okay, thank you. I agree with everything that the previous speaker had to say. I feel I was elected by the residents of this town to represent them at town meeting. I accept that every hour that I'm called upon to be in this room is part of that duty, and I don't have a problem. I don't have an issue listening to everyone's questions or debates. I don't find that to be a waste of my time. I also don't believe that attending every meeting held by a committee makes someone a reigning authority on that matter, nor do I believe not attending these meetings disqualifies a town meeting representative from having a valid reason to disagree with the presenter. I know most of you are saying, I can't believe she's up there again, and I just want to say, a lot of times I don't want to stand up here and speak, and what keeps me coming to this microphone is how many times I hear from other town meeting representatives that they have something to say and they're terrified to come up in front of the microphone and say it. And I try to encourage those people to get up, but some people just feel as though if they get up here, they're not going to be listened to, that they might get told to sit down because they're disqualified for their argument. And I really feel that those people need to be heard too. So unfortunately, when they can't come up for themselves, I often come up for them. And I just want you to know that I would like to make sure that this body votes for the method that is going to get the most information across. I would like, before I came to town meeting, I didn't know much about format. This is the way Chelmsford did it. I didn't realize other towns didn't do it, didn't participate in the question and answer period first. What I really think is important is that people feel comfortable to come up to the microphone and say what's on their mind, and that they feel as though they're being heard, that they're not being snickered at, they're not being booed down, people aren't talking over them in the background and being insulting, because it's really hard to stand up here. And most of the people who vote for town meeting are not public speakers, and so this is hard. And so I would like us to vote for what you think is going to make people the most comfortable, but allow them to get up and say what they need to. And if eliminating the question and answer period will facilitate that, then that's one thing. If we really need to stay with the question and answers period because it slows the flow of information down, and it allows people time to absorb any new information and then think about it and then go to a vote, then that's what we should be voting for. So I personally, that's how I feel. Thank you for listening to me tonight.
Mr. Thorne?
Mr. Acting Moderator, are we in the question and answer period or are we in debate?
It is my understanding since night one we've been working with discussion, which means it's a mixture of both question and answer and traditional debate. So you can ask your questions as was previously mentioned, and then you have up to 5 minutes to make your point why you either want to vote for or against it.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I come to the microphone, Glenn Thorne, Precinct 5, to try and, there aren't a lot of words here, trying to understand with clarity what we're being asked to vote on. So through you to the presenter of this article, I have a couple of simple questions. I'm going to try them out. To the presenter of this article, we will have a question and answer period for the articles as they are presented and come up. Is that correct?
You always have an opportunity to ask questions and have them answered, and it's always been our policy that even when we had a separate question and answer period, during debate or during discussion, you could ask questions during that time. So what this article intends to do is just to blend them together so that people who want to ask questions can ask questions, and if people who want to argue can argue. And sometimes when people argue, they answer questions for other people. So then you don't have to ask those questions.
So we can, at the same time that we're asking questions, we can also have a moment of debate on the article. We're removing the section that we're looking at here, and we're just allowing the two to merge together for a somewhat limited amount of time.
Right. Our bylaw says that we are required to have a separate question and answer period, but our policy has always been that during discussion you can ask questions and have them answered.
So as I understand it, questions and answers will still be allowed, debate will still be allowed, and we don't have to sort of reinitiate the process according to the old words that were being removed here, so that we can move forward with both questions and debates and comments that pertain to the article, focused on the article while we're discussing it. That will not change. It's just that we don't break the presentations, questions and answers and debates apart into two sections. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Reddy?
Where's the mic? Dennis Reddy, Precinct 8.
as you know, I've attended a lot of town meetings, and some of my observations have been as follows, that there are times when the question period went on so long that the main body of people were tired of the issue and didn't even want to get into debate. And therefore, if someone who liked to follow the rules, for example, maybe they had an amendment that people would have gone with, but the people were so tired of listening to this particular article in the form of questions that they'd actually move the question before the person got up to make the amendment, because we were at it for 2 hours and they were tired of listening to it. I think you also have to remember that this is our meeting and we can set the rules, and because we set a rule 2-4 years ago, doesn't mean we can't change it. That's what it's all about. We tried it. It didn't work very well, and we should change it. This meeting has gone a lot better than if we had gone through a series of questions before each article and then got into the debate. So I would strongly urge you to support this article.
Karen Utek, Precinct 5. I was up here for Dad, but I had an observation. I really enjoyed this town meeting, that the moderator didn't have to police the questions and make sure that they weren't too debate-like. I felt like we wasted a lot of time, and it was animosity in the past because we had to judge everyone's question and whether it was really a question. So I like this because I like that we won't have to do that in the future. Thanks.
Mr. Foley?
David Foley, Precinct 5. I just wanted to make a comment on the question and answer period. I know that we've been basically bypassing it for this town meeting, and everything seems to be going fine. People can still ask questions. I like the question and answer period, and I like the analogy that comes into my head is when serving on a jury, the instruction that's given to the jury by the judge is that when you go back to deliberate, try to avoid taking a straw poll initially to see where people stand. Try to prevent arguing initially on the case, but first begin with a review of the facts so that people don't essentially get kind of hardened into a particular position that they're afraid to back down from. And that's how I view the question and answer period, because you haven't necessarily taken a position. Now, a lot of people have already taken a position. They know exactly how they're going to vote when they come in here, and sometimes it's better just have the vote and be done with it, because why waste 2 hours and then at the end everyone's just going to vote the same anyway. But the question and answer period might go on too long. Possibly it could be limited in time, I don't know, but I just wanted to say that I do appreciate the question and answer period, because it does give an opportunity for those people maybe that don't understand something can ask a question, and other people maybe they're not quite sure how they're going to vote on it, might have some information. Sometimes a question that comes in too late in the debate, and it's almost like so much water is over the dam at that point that the question really doesn't affect anything. Thank you.
Sure.
Badru Plepan, Precinct 5. Mr. Moderator, through you to the audience, speaker and others. So this is my third town meeting, learning a lot, and on the process itself. Also, one of the observations I would make is that with the amount and different variety of topics that are brought, obviously the Selectmen's Committee, the Finance Committee, and School Committee have all made their recommendations and analysis and analogies and detailed work. But many a time, when the presentation is finally put together and presented to the large audience, who may not have gone into all the details that the committee has already gone through, this question and answer period is our education time. Yes, it is laborious, it is long, and as previous speakers have pointed out, that it is the time to find information that you may not have otherwise understood and digested and analyzed for impact. And sometimes that helps quite a bit to understand. Just this past week in this session, when we were voting on the sewer fund, we discovered what can be done with financial arrangements and why project management procedures could help in realigning finance. Others have pointed out that people are not great public speakers. I'm not one. It's taking a lot for me to stand up and come up with these words right now, but it allows me to understand the history of the topic, the details behind it. There are a lot of great speakers who can come up, ask a couple of questions, and because they have the history of the town and the workings and a lot of years of service to the community through these town meetings, are able to eloquently position, anchor the discussion to one or the other. We are, as a community, trying to grow and protect what the motto says of what the sires have gotten us, but we do need an opportunity to maintain the question and hour, asking questions, understanding the facts. Maybe a compromise is that, just as the current moderator has done in the past 2 sessions, I believe, is to offer the opportunity to combine those on certain articles that may not be of, based on how pre-analysis or the working session goes, may be able to find out which ones can be combined and move things faster. But it is essential for certain number of articles that there is a period of pure question and answer, inquiry period to educate ourselves. Without belaboring the point, I think I would vote no, but offer a compromise, and I'm not going to offer an amendment in any form, but I would suggest that the body consider that the moderator does have the ability to present at the start of a town meeting based on the articles on the list. For some articles, the ability to merge question and debate at the same time and make that as a choice of operation, which I think will be more suitable, in my personal opinion. Having seen, I don't know about everybody else, but at least I have seen one other country's representative system work, and having been a youth parliamentarian myself, know the benefit of having gone through that and learned through that process what it means. And for those here, it might be the equivalent of a model United Nations, what question and answer and debate means. So I would urge people to consider that by voting yes on this, you take away for some amount of time, not for eternity, for some amount of time, but by voting no, you still retain the flexibility. You provide the flexibility to the moderator to keep things moving apace. Thank you.
Mr. Bruce, right before I start, I just want to, as a point of information, having been the chairman of the MARCOM committee, under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 39, Section 15, the moderator has broad discretion to run the meeting. So to your point, to the previous speaker's point, even if we were to take the bylaw out, there could be times where the moderator could insert a question and answer period at his discretion. There wasn't a direct question to him, but having served on that committee as the chairman, he always has that discretion and flexibility to insert that back in if you were to take the bylaw out tonight. So, Mr. Bruce?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Doug Bruce, Precinct 9. I don't have any questions per se for the presenter, and I appreciate the sentiment of this article. We're all here on night 4 of our spring town meeting, and we're all interested in speeding up the town meeting. And I support that 100%. But let me just remind everybody that we have suspended that rule for this spring town meeting, yet here we are still on night 4. I question whether it has actually provided the impact that we think it might provide us in the future. We, as town meeting reps, deal with very mundane issues sometimes, and we deal sometimes with very complex issues. whether it's a zoning bylaw overlay or something like a stormwater, a new request for stormwater enterprise fund or grinder pumps or something like that. Sometimes we deal with some very complex issues. And I personally really appreciate the opportunity to be able to have that question and answer period, that give and take with the people who are responsible for doing that full and thorough research of the issue, the subcommittee of the committee that is responsible for presenting the issue to us. I don't go to all those committee meetings or those subcommittee meetings, so that's my one and only opportunity for really understanding the issue in depth. And I appreciate that question and answer period for those complex issues. I absolutely agree with the consent decrees for all those issues that are expedience, for the purposes of expediency and moving this meeting along. But as town meeting reps, we are responsible for discharging our duty to understand issues and to vote our conscience with a clear and thorough understanding, and to forfeit our right, or the rule that we have right now, to forfeit that and say we'll cast that aside and let the town moderator decide what question and answer or debate period might prevail, I think is letting go of some of our authority as town meeting reps, some of the responsibility that we have. We always have the option of suspending that rule, as we have at this town meeting this spring session. To give that up and then to ask for it back at some future date is much more difficult than to maintain that authority and suspend it on a case-by-case basis. I would urge everybody to vote no on this issue and then consider it on a case-by-case basis going forward. Think about, just let me leave you with this, think about our new Supreme Court Justice, who was elected to his position not by, he was elected to that position by a small rule change in our Congress. And that's what we're considering tonight, is a small rule change that on the very surface of it may seem insignificant, but could have long and distant ramifications. Thank you.
Mr. Thorne?
Glenn Thorne, Precinct 5. I would urge town meeting to support this article. Let me tell you why. There are many of us in this room who have been town meeting reps for a long time, some continuously, sometimes off and on. And one of the things that has been a serious problem in town meeting is when we were in the question and answer session, there would be very frequently people who want to debate the article in question and answer session, which causes the moderator to have to act as a policeman, because debate is for debate and question and answers is for question and answers, and sometimes we can do question and answers during debate, but how do you handle that? So over the course of more than 25 years, it has been a problem situation to have the moderator police the question and answer session to prevent it from devolving into debates, which are not technically allowed in a question and answer session. That's for debate. But now we have the ability to remove this section so that we know that question and answers are allowed with debate, which provokes other questions, which will provoke other answers all at the same time. You don't have to police question and answers because they're available at any time. And so the counter argument to what I've just said is that somebody's going to stand up and say, hey, I call the question. But the town meeting as a representative body knows, hey, we haven't talked about this enough, and frequently we will vote that call the question down. And that's how we continue to ask questions and debate and learn new things as the questions and debate continue to evolve. So instead of segmenting our town meeting, and you can only ask questions and answers, don't debate, go to the back of the line, it all happens at the same time. And I think that improves the velocity of the town meeting. It certainly improves the awareness of the subject matter, because questions and answers and debate generates more questions, which hopefully have more answers. It did over the past few days that we have been here. So by taking this out, you say, the moderator, you don't have to be a policeman anymore and shut down any statements that have to be debate. It all happens at the same time. The town meeting becomes more effective. We don't have to worry about that police function, and we all learn more. So I ask the town meeting to support this article to increase the velocity of the town meeting, increase the interaction between the people that are standing at the microphone, debating and asking questions till the next person comes up. And I have a great deal of confidence in the town meeting that if somebody comes up and says, I'm going to call a question, and there's got 5 people standing behind him, we'll vote that person down. So I urge you to support this article.
Ms. Monahan?
Ruth E. Monahan, Precinct 3, West Chelmsford. And I just want to say that I also support the article. My feeling is that very often questions and answers naturally evolve into a discussion. Through that discussion, you often have a clarification so that the questions and answers automatically become, oh, I get it. And my feeling is that to separate them, now there's a distance between when there was that question and answer and when we get around to talking about what we really meant by it. And if we have them close together, right together, we get it. So my feeling is I'm in support of this.
Thank you. Ms. Tiano?
Mary Tiano, Precinct 8, and I was also fortunate enough to serve on the MARCOM committee, and we did spend a fair amount of time on this question, this part of the charter, and I would vote no. I am going to vote no on this question for the very reason question and answer should be, as members of this body, we should come up and ask your question for informational purposes. And just because multiple times we've sat here and seen people take advantage of that, A, it doesn't make it right, but B, it doesn't mean we need to take it away. I would encourage the town moderator to fulfill his job more strenuously if people are taking advantage. And I would tell my fellow reps, don't take advantage of it, because people do have questions and they deserve to have an answer. And they should deserve to get that information without it slanted by debate. Get your information. When people are ready to debate, share your opinion. Urge your reasons why, pro or con against the question. But let people get the information first. That's the whole point of it. Thank you.
Brian Latina, Precinct 4. If you noticed when I first came up and I said it's very powerful to move the question, we have met those cases where people were in line and we got tired and we stopped the debate, stopped the question. I've never voted for moving the question when there's people in line because I want to hear them. I'm not here to leave. I'm here to listen. I'm here to spend an awful lot of money. In fact, the other night, you know, we added another $35 to the 93-year-old lady down my street, and I'm not thrilled about that, but I am a town meeting rep and I fully support it. The other thing I did not do when I came up to this microphone is start asking questions. Question and answer period requires the presenter to answer the question or the moderator to answer the question. I purposely didn't do that because our moderator is very good at what he does, and I didn't want that debate, the answer that he might have given would have been probably pretty good debate. So by having a question and answer period, it actually allows the presenter to continue the presentation and give the rest of the body the benefit of their expertise. Debate is completely different. When I come up to the microphone to debate, I'm trying to convince you to be with me and vote the same way I'm thinking. When you're doing question and answer, it's up to the presenter to have the right answers. So I'd urge you to vote no on this, and with all due respect, our moderator keeps getting better and better. The job is a tremendous job.
I'm not insulted.
It's a very difficult job to be chairman of a committee or to be a moderator and try to stay that common line. I would urge the moderator to work on that question and answer period. Keep it, work on it, and we're supposed to be asking questions we don't know. So when a former school committee member gets up here and starts asking school committee questions, gavel them down and tell them to go sit down. Or when Mr. Latina comes up and asks a question that you know I know, gavel me down and send me back. But please don't disallow questions by people that might be a little more shy than me. I'm going to come up and debate if I feel strongly about something, and I'm not going to waste my ability to debate in question and answer. But the gentleman at that mic up in the front knows when that happens and should stop it. So I'd urge you to vote no, and then use question and answer the way it's designed. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do I have to reintroduce myself? Badri, Precinct 5. So the previous speakers have commented that, for a lot of people have volunteered their time for a very long number of years as town meeting reps, and they have seen question answer sessions devolve into a debate, a posturing and a rhetorical question session in many ways, and maybe the moderator has, who is the moderator, has a lot of work to do. But I think I will make a lot of people either, say oohs and ahs, but somewhere in the scientific principle it's said that if you keep doing the same thing, you get the same results. In the same way, in my line of work, if the same set of people are asking the same questions and there's the same type of behavior, then maybe we need to change the people's behavior, not the process by which it goes. So I think it's important, as has been pointed out, if historically people have been taking a posture position and abusing or misusing the process and the time allocation and the type of questions to be asked, then maybe we need to introspect as people and ask, what is our behavioral change that we need to be doing to make this good for everyone? Thanks.
Mr. Diggs?
Glenn Diggs, Precinct 2. I would urge town meeting members to approve Article 28. And the reason is that it would seem that most of the arguments to go against it are primarily from the standpoint of there would be not enough discussion, not enough questions, and so forth and so on. I think that the fact that we are here on the fourth night attests to the fact that in some ways it promotes even more dialogue. In my brief public career, I brought up something that was at the inappropriate time, and I was sent back to the penalty box to serve my time, and then came back. And I think that intermixing both questions and comments is good, because not only do you think about the questions at the beginning, you may think about the questions as it gets involved. And I think it creates a better dynamic in presenting it all at the same time. I think that sitting here, I couldn't tell the difference between the meetings that there was two parts and the meeting that was one part. I think the dialogue was very good. I think that everyone participated. I think it made people more comfortable in coming up, that am I asking it a question, am I making a comment, and that people shouldn't feel that way. They should feel comfortable. This is their meeting. This is their home, and they should be able to come up at any point and discuss either issue when they want to and when they feel comfortable in doing it. And again, that's why I urge you to approve Article 28. Thank you.
Not seeing or hearing anybody else at the microphone at this time, I'm going to ask that we take our clickers. This is a simple majority. Press 1 if you're in favor, and 2 if you're opposed. There are 79 in favor, 38 opposed, 5 abstentions. The article passes. Do you want me to stay? I can do number 29 if you want. Thank you. All right, no, I think that's all your paperwork.
Thank you very much. Article 29.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Manager.
Moderator. Article 29 has to do with acceptance of roadways as public ways or street acceptances. As you can see on the list and screen before you, we have 6 roadways we're asking for public acceptance. The reason this is important for the community is accepting a public way provides the responsibility for the town to maintain the roadway going forward, snow and ice removal and so forth. It also adds the roadway mileage to our Chapter 90 inventory, which affects the amount of gasoline tax that comes back to the community for ongoing road maintenance. So with that as introduction, I want to turn the microphone over to Steve Yonley, our Assistant Town Engineer, who will provide an overview as to why these streets and what's being proposed here.
Hi, good evening. What we have before you tonight is 6 streets. The purpose of this was back in the fall, we did kind of an internal audit almost, if you will, of accepted, unaccepted private streets. We identified a number of streets that, for whatever reason, through the years, never made it that final step of this process of acceptance. The town has maintained, paved, sewered these streets, but we've shorted ourselves through the years with, as the town manager spoke, through the Chapter 90 reimbursement. So we've developed a program. This is the first step. You'll see me probably over the next 5 or 6 years coming with batches of streets that have been streets in town for, many, many years. This was kind of the pilot part of the program. We picked 6 of them that were relatively simple to generate the plans, simple to come up with the documents, and we've been through the steps at the selectmen, the planning board, and now here at town meeting tonight.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 29.
The Board of Selectmen have a recommendation.
Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval.
Time for inquiry.
Planning Board.
Oh, the Planning Board also?
Unanimously
Be my guest.
recommends this legislation.
Okay, thank you. Now's the time for inquiry, question and answer, and debate.
Claire Janot, Precinct 7. I live on an unaccepted road, I'll be straightforward with you, and the road's been there for probably 30 years when the development was first built. My understanding was that the reason the 2 residents on my road couldn't get any services related to street sweeping or plowing is because the road didn't meet the current criteria at the time of being, having a storm drain, which is probably a good thing at this point, and and whatever else, curbing, you're talking about a well-paved, fairly wide road that no bus needs to ever go down, and it is kind of ridiculous to require curbing or sidewalks or storm drains on, in my opinion. Now, can you explain to me how these streets are all meeting those requirements, and are they meeting all those requirements?
Well, first of all, you live on there's 3 classifications of a roadway.
Educate me.
Accepted, unaccepted, and private. Yours is private.
All right.
Never intended to be a public road.
Yeah.
These were built and constructed at their time that they were built and constructed to be a public road, but that just never went through this part of the process. For whatever reason, I don't know. Most of these were built long before I was around. So what we're doing is we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
Okay.
The private roads like the one you're on,
Yep.
and ones that have been built recently, no more than 2 lots, they get waivers from construction standards off the town's subdivision rules and regs. But they're built never to be a public road. If you wanted to make it a public road, it becomes on you or the residents on that street to bring it to town standard.
Okay, so to answer my question specifically, thank you for that classification.
Sure.
Do all these meet town standards?
At the time they were built, they did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Reddy, Precinct 1. Is Wellman Ave or Scotty Hollow Drive, are those accepted roads?
Yes.
They are, the full entire complexes of those? Because I'm wondering, Kennedy Drive, is that going to just go past the post office, or is that going into the complex?
No, it does not go into the complex.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion or inquiry? Up?
I'm usually faster. Beth Logan, Precinct 3. Now I'm a little confused. Just, at the time they were built, they met town standards. Is there work that has to be done today once we accept this? And how much will that cost?
No, no work.
Thank you.
Brian Latina, Precinct 4. Do these streets have the 4-foot drainage system that we just passed the other night? Or will we as a town have to buy that, pay for that?
The majority of these, like Home Street's only a couple 100 feet long. Off the top of my head, I can't even tell you if there's a catch basin on it. The other ones have drainage systems.
But for the street to meet our standard in today's world, right now we have 6 streets there.
Yep.
They don't necessarily meet the federal standard that we just passed the other night.
We're required to maintain them to that standard. Even if they were unaccepted, I'd have to maintain them to that standard because they're open to public travel. We've maintained them for years. This is just a process because we've been, as I said, we've been shorting ourselves on our Chapter 90 road reimbursement. This is the first step in that process.
But you said
I've been responsible for these roads. You know, the Department of Public Works has been responsible for these streets. We plow them, we pave them, we sord them.
So we're doing all the work on unaccepted streets.
Correct.
But we're not doing it on private streets.
Again, because the unaccepted streets were, for whatever reason, these were constructed to be a public road. A private street was not constructed to be a public road. Private streets are basically common driveways, 2 lots.
We heard that we get some revenue from doing this. I don't see any benefit outside of getting some revenue. How much revenue do we get for these 6 streets?
The way the Chapter 90 formula breaks down, we get roughly $6,750 per mile. This adds a little more than 0.6 of a mile to that inventory. Again, these are all small streets. As you'll see me every spring, some of the roads will be a lot longer, so we'll chink away.
Doesn't sound like a break even to me.
No.
Any further?
Jim Clancy, Precinct 2. Mr. Moderator, through the previous speaker, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is we're already maintaining these streets because they're unaccepted streets. There's no additional cost from accepting these streets. We're simply getting more money from the state because they're now part of the formula.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further? Calling once, calling twice? Okay, so now will be the time to vote. A affirmative vote would be to accept these streets: Biltmore Ave, Frederick Street, Glendale Road, Holmes Street, Kennedy Drive, and Schofield Street.
The last statement by the assistant engineer that private streets are basically common driveways, whereas unaccepted streets are public streets that for one reason or another were never actually, it became part of the town's inventory, actually made a lot of sense to me. And I think it resonates with the town meeting reps as well.
The article unanimously passes, 123 in favor, no opposition, no abstentions. Now we turn back the clock and go back to Article 23. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 23 and then followed by Article 24, the final 2 articles for consideration on the warrant. They both pertain to speed limits in the community, and they both come to you at town meeting because they were included as part of the Municipal Modernization Act that you keep hearing referred to regarding a number of articles of 2016 by the legislature. In Massachusetts, local speed limits are subject to state approval. We cannot modify or establish a speed limit without the approval of the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. What the legislature has done here is they're allowing the community the option of or whether to define the default speed limit in the community, which is currently 30 miles per hour, to 25, and then a subsequent article pertains to allow it for speed zones. So with this, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Police Chief James Spinney, who has a presentation for you and will explain the rationale behind the support for this article. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I just wanted to start out by saying I've been Chief of Police in Chelmsford for going over 2.5 years now, and it has been an honor and a privilege to be your police chief. And I also want to reiterate the fact that it has been and will continue to be my top priority to be a partner with this community, and I speak for the men and women on the department as well. Partner with this community, work on issues with this community, and solve problems with this community. So I just want to start that out. Thank you. And not to go on and on, but in everything going across our nation today, I feel blessed that the police department has this community support, and you certainly have our support, so thank you again. Like the town manager just explained, our state legislature last fall passed sections 193 and 194 of chapter 218, and basically what that did, it created 2 new chapters under chapter 90, section 17C, and chapter 90, section 18B. And I don't have a long presentation, but I'm going to go through it nice and slow. I know there are a number of concerns, completely legitimate. Some of those are misconceived, and I'm hoping I can clear that up for you. So let's begin. So this is what we're talking about tonight. As the manager said, right now, our statutory default speed limit in Chelmsford, and I'll get into what that means in a minute, is 30 miles an hour. So what are the laws and regulations that govern speed limits in Massachusetts? Chapter 17 and Chapter 90, Section 17 and Section 18 dictates the requirements for establishing posted speed limits and statutory limits on all streets and highways. So what is a regulatory speed limit? Another phrase for regulatory speed limit would be a posted road. A regulatory speed limit is one that has a special speed regulation, speed limit signs posted per Mass General Law 90, Section 18. A special speed regulation is established by conducting an engineering study, having the authority responsible for legislating municipal traffic code, which in Chelmsford case is the Board of Selectmen. They would approve that study, they would approve the speed zone that we're requesting, and that report would be sent to Mass DOT for their approval. If Mass DOT reads that report and the data is in line with what the town is requesting, you get this. You get a posted speed limit on a road. So the example I used here is obviously Concord Road. So I believe it was back in the 70s, Concord, a special speed regulation study was conducted on Concord Road, which resulted in a posted speed zone of 35 miles an hour. Now, Concord Road is a little unique. It does change. It changes whether you're outbound or inbound. But for the example of the slide, it's a posted roadway that will not change. So what is a statutory speed limit? A statutory speed limit exists in the absence of a special speed regulation and official posted speed limit. Chapter 90, Section 17 requires that drivers operate motor vehicles at a rate of speed that is no greater than reasonable and proper with regard to the use of the road and safety of the public. Reasonable and proper speeds are defined as, we all know school zones, 20 miles an hour in a school zone. And for tonight's discussion, 30 miles an hour in a thickly settled or business district. That is how the law is right now. That's the statutory limit that governs Chelmsford. What is a thickly settled or business district? Chapter 90, Section 1 defines that as a business district, the territory contiguous to any way which is built up with structures devoted to business, or the territory contiguous to any way where dwelling houses are situated at such distances that will average less than 200 feet between them for a distance of a quarter mile or over. How does the new speed limit legislation passed in 2016 affect my town? So like I said earlier, sections 193 and 194 were created. This created two new sections under Chapter 90. Section 193 would allow a municipality to opt into Chapter 90, Section 17C, thereby reducing the statutory speed limit from 30 to 25 on all city or town roadways that would fall under that thickly settled or business district. The only stipulation is you'd have to notify Mass DOT. We do not have to ask them permission to do this. We would just do it. Section 194, which I'll get to in the next article, refers to the 20-mile-an-hour safe zone. If a city or town opts into Section 193, will that supersede any existing posted speed limit? And the answer is no. This legislation would only affect streets that are currently governed by the statutory speed limit. If an existing special speed regulation is in place, it would continue to govern. Now, I will say that Chelmsford is a little unique. Almost every street in this town, absent a dozen or so, are statutorily governed. For whatever reason, probably because Chelmsford was satisfied with the 30-mile-an-hour rate, very few streets have had engineering studies completed resulting in official posted streets. So I have some examples here of streets that would not be changed by this if the town meeting decided to adopt the article. This is North Road. North Road will stay 35 miles an hour in this section. This is Northern Ave. Northern Ave will stay 40 miles an hour. And this is just an example of our downtown business district. It happens to be 25 now. We have 25-mile-an-hour zones in town now, folks, and it's been fine. They're designed to slow people down. Proctor Road is a perfect example of a street that is actually posted. I think it even drops to a 20 at one point. And everything's been okay. I'm going to skip by 24 for now. I just wanted to go to this graph. Oh, my graph has been changed again on me. John, do we have the new graph? I had a little bit better optics. We can certainly use it. Over the last couple months, I've reviewed a lot of data. And although common sense tells us that a faster vehicle travels, the more harm it could do to a human being, a pedestrian, there's been a ton of studies on this over the last 20 years. The United States, Canada, England, I read a number of them. United States Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, National Highway Safety Administration, Center for Problem-Oriented Policing. I've reviewed a lot of reports from all those different entities, and this graph is a pretty fair representation of what those reports have shown. And what I found striking about it was with small increments in speed was the significant increase in percentage of serious to fatal injury. So down below is percentage of pedestrian injury, and the left-hand side is vehicle speed. So a vehicle traveling 20 miles an hour, according to many of these reports, a vehicle traveling 20 miles an hour, there's a 5% chance of a fatality and a 65-70% chance of injury. So going from 20 to 30, 10 miles an hour, you jump from a 5% chance of a fatality up to about a 45% chance. I found that a little striking. I was not aware of that type of ratio, so that's why I wanted to present this. And then at 40 miles an hour, obviously, you're at over 80% of a fatal type situation. And John, can we back up to 24, please? I just wanted to wrap up with a couple comments. Like I said, I've been hearing a lot of questions and concerns over the last couple months, and I just wanted to reiterate to everybody, this is not about revenue, because if it was, I'd be the last person standing before you. This is not about speed traps. We don't do speed traps in Chelmsford. Wherever you see a cruiser running radar, it's because a resident wants it there. Before the snow cleared this spring, I had a 3-page list going of residents that wanted the signboards in their neighborhoods. We run radar based on feedback that I and my staff get from residents. Myself and the manager, this law is brand new. Myself and the manager met several times when this law was enacted. And at the end of the day, we felt it was an opportunity and in fact an obligation to bring it to town meeting where we can have a discussion. And you can decide if you think it's a good fit for this community. That's really as simple as it is. So that's my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions before we move on to the safe zone. I have my water.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
A majority of the Finance Committee recommends approval of Article 23.
And does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen recommends approval by a vote of 4 to 1.
Time for inquiry or discussion?
I love our police department. Glenn
Please
Thorne,
identify
Precinct
yourself,
5.
Mr. Thorne.
Pardon?
Please identify yourself.
I just wanted to start with a positive note here. Glenn Thorne, Precinct 5.
Thank you.
I'm an engineer, as many of you know, so I have been conducting experiments around town with respect to this particular article. I'm very familiar with decreasing the zones in towns like Cambridge, where a lot of the streets are lined with cars, they're one way, and you better not be going 30 miles an hour if somebody opens a door. So you really have to slow it down, and that makes a lot of sense to me. So I have tried on 4 different occasions to drive around Chelmsford at 25 miles an hour. Anybody else tried that? Anybody? I find it extraordinarily difficult. It doesn't make sense for wide streets. Main Street, 25 miles an hour. I came over here at 25 miles an hour. I had cars stacked up behind me. You know, so while it's a good idea for certain kinds of towns, certain kinds of neighborhoods, and believe me, I wholeheartedly support safety zones at 20 miles an hour, and I think the town meeting will as well. But to drop our speed limit from 30 to 25 on Main Street, on Old Westford Road, a number of the other large streets in town, doesn't make any sense to me. I can understand the safety reasons it might apply to it, but getting around town at 25 miles an hour is extraordinarily difficult. And if you haven't tried that experiment, I urge you to vote this down and go try it, and you'll see what I mean. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Elaine McDonald, Precinct 1. Could I poll the committees that had why they said yes, why they said no?
Sure. Finance Committee?
Yeah. I voted for it. Tell her. Yeah. Come on, get up to that one. Okay. I voted for the article because I thought it would be safer for all of us, ultimately. That was my reason.
I voted for it because, at least in my neighborhood, the majority of the streets that are don't have posted speed limit signs are heavily populated, no sidewalks, lots of kids.
I voted against it. I think 25 is very slow. I think if you want to slow people down, the only way you're going to do that is by putting a cop to monitor that. Police officer. Here.
I voted in favor. First, because there's no real financial impact for it. Secondly, because I also live in a neighborhood which is very thickly settled. People fly through there. And I find that, just like Route 3, suggested speed limits and actual speed limits are different. When people see Route 3, they're traveling 65 miles per hour down Route 3. You see 25, you're probably going to be going around 30, 32. That's okay. but when it's 35, people fly by at 40, 45. That's not.
I voted against it for the same reason the previous, well, I like it the way it is, I guess.
I technically missed the day when we voted on this, unfortunately, but if I had voted, I would have voted against it. I do want to say, though, I think I applaud the police chief for bringing this forward. I believe he had an obligation to bring this forward to town meeting to make the decision. Nothing against the intent of why this is here this evening. I think the current speed limits we have, as we all know, we're all typically allowed to go a little bit over that. I think if we need to slow people down, I would totally support the police chief in putting up those signs that say strictly enforced and ticketing people if they're going 3, 4, 5 miles an hour over. I'm just against the idea of having speed limits that are so low that they're not going to be realistically enforced anyways. And I don't support that, but I do support the police chief trying to slow people down in town.
I support this. I think the police chief has carefully considered all the impacts and ramifications of lowering the speed limit. And it should be pointed out that this would not be automatic. It would be something that this board would have to vote to implement. I would hope that in the process of having this available to us, it would spur our DPW and the police department to have more roads limited regulatorily rather than statutorily. In other words, to go out and find out what the speed limit should be on those roads. I think that would be a more favorable outcome, but then the ones that don't need a higher threshold that way to be regulated at a 25 mile an hour, I think is appropriate.
I voted against this. I think it's the wrong solution to the wrong problem. When I polled the police chief, I learned that the residents are not complaining about drivers going faster than the current posted speed limits, is because they are going faster than the current posted speed limits, not because they want them to be driving at 25 miles an hour lower than that. The police chief explained he is not planning to enforce this, and I just truly don't feel that 100 signs on a road is going to stop most drivers from flying through here and using Chelmsford as a cut-through. Enforcement is going to be the only way to get that to stop happening. I also polled the chief. There has been no increase in speed-related accidents involving pedestrians, and I'm personally not comfortable with the stated policy that the police department doesn't intend to enforce 25 miles an hour but expects people to stay within 10 miles of that. I don't think that it is okay to have a public policy that it's okay to break the law a little bit. So I think also with today's cars being built safer, automatic braking in a lot of them are becoming more and more standard. I think this rule is overkill for this community. Thank you.
I voted in favor of it. I spend a lot of time driving around town, and I'm always amazed when I do go 30 how many cars are behind me tailgating. And so I also bought into the belief that if we put it down to 25, it would bring the speed down.
I supported the measure brought forth by the chief of police. The Board of Selectmen, I think, was the first body he brought it to. I believe he's very sincere when he says this is not about creating revenue. Following his presentation, I spent the next day trying to drive at 25 miles an hour. It wasn't easy, but I felt that if this saves even one injury in the town, it's worth it, and that's why I voted for it.
Was there any discussion about, one of the folks on the finance board said people fly on our street, that this could be applied with the residents saying, oh yeah, man, we need this, rather than just a blanket one?
Who are you asking the question of?
Just in general, was there any discussion of, like...
I can answer that question. There's a couple of points I'd like to make with regards to some of the comments. First of all, I'll answer your question, ma'am. The statute does allow at the discretion of the selectmen to either fully implement it townwide, or they can implement it anywhere they'd wish. Department of Transportation recommends against doing it piecemeal because of confusion to drivers. However, it is an option. The selectmen could enact this. It would require some additional signage in whatever neighborhood that this was put into place. The other remedy that one of the speakers spoke of with some of our main roads would become too low, we can adjust any road we want, ladies and gentlemen. So if the town adopted this, and let's say for the sake of argument, people thought Old Westford Road is too main of a street to be 25, we can raise the speed limit after an engineered study. So for me, it's about the neighborhoods. We can make any adjustment we want at a later time to address a problematic roadway. And to answer another comment made, just some towns that have already enacted this: Arlington, Beverly, Salem, Somerville, Cambridge, and Boston have recently put this into place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Reddy, Precinct 1. First, we have a fantastic police department. I appreciate everything you do. This has nothing to do with you personally, but I am totally against lowering the speed limit for a couple of reasons. One, I think it'll open up Pandora's box for some unintended consequences of significantly more calls from neighbors suggesting that people are speeding through their neighborhoods. I think personally 30 miles an hour is a good speed limit. If people are now traveling 30 miles an hour, but the speed limit is 25, you're gonna have a lot of residents that now feel more empowered to think that that car was actually speeding through their neighborhood. They're gonna request more speed traps as a result, and I think it's gonna actually put more strain on the police department as a result. I don't know if anybody has driven down Acton Road, but there is an actual speed limit monitor if you get down closer to, I think, Jones Farm. And it is probably about, I don't know, a couple hundred feet from the fire station. And anytime I go down that road, I absolutely make sure to get down to 25 miles an hour, because there is typically a cruiser that will sit by that fire station and they will get you. And I will tell you, it is the most painful, most worst experience of my driving day if I have to go to that side of the town because of that. And that's how I know how bad 25 miles an hour is. I also live on Turnpike Road. It is 35 miles an hour. Probably 500 feet away, I hit a school zone. I have to get down to 20 miles an hour every single day. And even though I know that, I still some days forget about it. And it's like, oh man, I try to get down as quickly as I can, but it's difficult to do that. It also, I think, sends the message that neighborhoods maybe in the hitching post are more important to be 25 miles an hour than a thickly settled road like Turnpike Road, where we have just as many residents, in all honesty, on that road, but yet our speed limit is 35. I run up and down that road. I don't want to get hit by cars, but at the same time, I actually appreciate that it's 35 miles an hour, because sometimes I got to get my kid to school, I got to get back. I'm a realtor. I spend a lot of time traveling around town. Getting from point A to point B can be extremely painful when you're behind somebody that's driving 25 miles an hour, because now I'm driving like 22 miles an hour so that I'm not behind Selectman LaFave, who's, causing traffic jams. So, it's not a personal thing, but I go on to Route 3 and I wish it was 75 miles an hour, to be honest with you, because most of the people are actually traveling 75 miles an hour. I don't want things to be an arbitrary decision. I want to know that 30 miles an hour is a legal limit. I find it difficult sometimes when I have a cruiser behind me to actually travel the speed limit. I probably break the law sometimes, I'll admit. But the fact is, it's difficult to have a cruiser behind you. You're nervous. If you start getting into back roads, you're going to start getting nervous. Things are going to start happening. And more importantly is that it's just one of those things that I think, as I have kids that are growing up, eventually they're going to be 16. They're going to start to drive. And when I was 16 years old, I had a tendency to have a lead foot. This is going to be a situation where they're going to end up with a driving record that looks a lot worse, because at 35 now, they're now an offender. I think if you really want to reduce speeds, you got to go ahead and actually look at marked roads, decide which roads really need to be reduced. Put up a speed limit sign on those. I don't think you have to reduce the entire town just to make the difference. So I would hope everyone votes no on this.
Ruthie Monahan, West Chelmsford, Precinct 3. I also am against this. I think a default of 30 miles an hour is plenty. I gotta tell you, I'm driving a low-end car. I have a manual transmission. When I'm in second gear at 25 miles an hour, I think, oh God, I should be in third. When I'm in third gear at 25 miles an hour, I think, oh God, I should be in second, because that's right that place. Plus which, if you looked at my car, you'd laugh, because it has a speedometer that says it can go up to 140. Ha! In whose dreams? So when I'm looking between 20 and 30, I'm looking at that big A space. Ask me to try to find 25. I go bananas every time I'm going into Chelmsford Center and I hit that point where it says 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. I say, can I do it? And I spend more time looking at my speedometer than I do looking at the road. This is not a safe thing. Plus which, are we saying 25? Because we figure people are going to go 30 anyway. So what the heck, let's say 25? Or do we mean that we really, honest and truly want them to go only 25? I think 30 is perfectly slow enough. It's what Main Street is. I live on Main Street. I do 30. When I'm on Granville Road and I hit the school zone, I do go 20 miles an hour. And I am fine with that. And they also have things I can see. But I honest and truly feel like if you really want 30 miles an hour, enforce 30 miles an hour. Get the cruisers out there. There were a couple on Main Street this week for the first time in ages. And I was happy to see those red lights flashing. But enforce what we have. Be like Horton the elephant. I meant what I said, and I said what I meant, and do it.
Well, if that's a question, the police department pulled over 3,434 cars last year. Okay, so if I've given the impression to anybody on any of the boards over the last few weeks that this is something the police department was not going to enforce, I guess I'll take the bad on that. That was never my intention. We maintain consistent enforcement regardless of the posted speed limit, and we will continue to do so regardless of the posted speed limit. Our neighborhoods are a top priority, and we do enforce the speed limits, but we're also reasonable, and the officers use their discretion. We don't write tickets for doing 31 over, and we're not going to write them for doing 26 over. My goal would be, if we were to adopt something like this, instead of, and I think it's already been said, and maybe I get in trouble for saying it, but if a street is posted at 30, I've been doing this job for 27 years. That does mean 40, 42. If we were to go town-wide with something like this and we got people closer to 25 or 30, I consider that a success. So that's my stance on it, but thank you.
Janet Dubner, Precinct 6. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that comment. I walk on the streets up around Westford Road and Dalton Road, and people don't stick to 30 miles an hour. We don't have sidewalks in town in many of our neighborhoods. And I'd be really happy if the speed limit came down a little bit, because unfortunately in Massachusetts, as a previous speaker said, people go a whole lot faster. You can't drive 55 miles an hour on Route 3 safely. You can't even do 55 on Route 128, 95 safely. And at least it's an effort to try to bring it down a little bit. I live on a busy road, and people don't stick to 30 miles an hour. So I may be in a minority here, but I'm going to vote for this. Thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you.
Lori Koulis, Precinct 6. You're not in the minority, because also I'm going to vote for it. I'm curious, what town, are there any towns surrounding us that have, or that are looking at this? I heard your list. I thought they were mostly cities.
So most recently Arlington, and then Beverly, Salem, Somerville, Cambridge, and Boston. I am unaware of a greater Lowell town.
So no surrounding
But it is
towns.
brand new.
Okay.
It really only became an option in November.
Okay. Hopefully, eventually, there would be, surrounding towns so that people would be used to it. I happen to be a pediatric nurse. I'm a school nurse in the district, but I also work at Children's Hospital in Boston on the trauma floor. And I want to tell you that you don't want to see any child or anybody hit by a car that's going 30 miles per hour. It's a very scary thing, and I'm sure that's why this regulation, one of the reasons why the regulation is going into effect. And I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Sue Dandera, Precinct 9. I do appreciate the safety intent of this and protecting the citizens. But based on the towns that have adopted it, again, mostly densely populated towns, I think the definition of thickly settled probably applies to a lot of the Chelmsford streets, but I think there's so many other considerations that really go into the appropriate speed limit, you know, sidewalks, population density, the width of the streets. So I am against this from a broad brush of saying, you know, lowering the speed limit across a town. As the chief said, we can adjust any road we want, and I'm a huge proponent of that. I think our key concern and our focus is the neighborhoods, and I did my engineering study driving home today, and on some roads, yes, it's very difficult to maintain 25 without creating chaos around you. But I will say, as I came into my neighborhood, I did not see a posted sign. I wanted to know what the speed limit was. Did not see a posted sign. I looked at my speedometer and I said, 30 is a little fast on these windy roads, and I'd like to see 25. And so I'm against the article. I think it's the wrong approach. I'm a complete advocate that we should go adjust the speed limits in these neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you.
Johanna Shaw, Precinct 9. I have a question about the engineering studies that would be required to make any posted speed limits on roads, like Old Westford Road was mentioned as ones that might be ridiculous at 25. What would it cost the town to go through the process to be able to post a speed limit on roads like that?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because I have it. The DPW director can correct me if I'm wrong, but that the cost would be minimal. It would more be manpower effort between the police department and the DPW. And let me read to you what the state DOT has described as the process for this study. A prerequisite to establishing a speed regulation and posting speed limit is a comprehensive engineering study at each location where speed control is contemplated. The purpose of the study is to establish a speed limit that is safe, reasonable, and self-enforcing. The most important step is measuring the prevailing speeds of motorists on a particular section of roadway under ideal conditions. The speed at or below which 85% of motorists travel. That's what the study would show. And that's how speed regulations are determined. You cannot lower a speed. So the prior speaker that would want the street lowered to a 25 would be very, very difficult, because the street has already been determined as a statutory 30. So the state has already deemed that all side roads are 30 unless we adopt this. We could not reestablish it as a 25.
Okay. One other question. I know you've said that the intent behind this is not revenue-based, and I appreciate that your interest is the safety of the residents, but let's not pretend that revenue isn't tied to speed limits. I've been fortunate enough to not get a speeding ticket in the town in the 10 years I've lived here, so I don't know where there might be a price break on amount of miles over the limit that you hit. I mean, is there a difference in the revenue that might come in from speeding tickets with that 5-mile-an-hour difference?
I have no idea. I do not even look at the tickets the officers write anymore to see if they're money or warnings. It's just not even a concern. In today's era, with everything going on across our nation, it's the last thing I look at. I know that we get Chapter 90 money from the state. I don't even see it. I can tell you that 7 out of every tickets we write in this town are warnings. And that's not going to change. I talked to the Beverly Police Chief when they enacted this statute, or this for them. They did several months of education, information. They put their information boards out. There's no gotcha mentality here. All written warnings for a long time. And the hope is, and the goal is, that consistent enforcement with education and education information would lead to voluntary compliance from motorists, and the speeds would come down automatically over time. But to answer your revenue question, I have no idea.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy Chebedy, Precinct 1. Couple questions. When I had read this originally, I was thinking that all numbered roads would not have gone down to 25, but by the definition you gave, it sounds like if it's still a condensed neighborhood, like
You said, what do you mean by numbered roads?
110, 27.
All right, state roads would not be
4.
affected by this. So any road that's a state road maintained by the state, this statute has no authority over those. So Princeton Street, Tingsboro Road, Littleton Road, Groton Road, Acton Road, where it becomes the state portion. None of that would change.
Okay, all right, so then my assumption going into this was correct. I
Correct.
kind of misinterpreted that, because I was thinking 129 in the center of town, out like Pat to Center School.
Well, we already have that. That drops to a 25 in our business district on 129.
And-
But where it becomes the state sections,
Okay,
it would all be unchanged. We would need permission to do that.
all right, so then numbered roads will stay as they are currently today.
Right.
Okay. Next question. I live on High Street, and after they took the stripes off the roads, so if you're coming up 27, it's 25 miles an hour, and I am the nudge that drives 25 miles an hour on 27 and 25 miles an hour as I whip around the corner to High Street, and I get honked all the time, and people pass me, but I absolutely want people to drive 25, so I think it's great there. But they now have a sign that says 30 miles an hour on High Street, because I think it was when the stripes came off, the sign came up. Is it your intention on streets that are currently marked 30, if you were to go to 25, would they then go to 25, or would you leave them at 30?
No, there's been a little phenomenon in this town over the last 30 years. There's been 30-mile-an-hour speed zone signs that have been popped up all over the place that shouldn't be.
Just to remind people.
Just to
that this-
remind people of the statutory speed limit. All those signs that are on streets that have not been regulated would become 25.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is, in order to make sure people understand that the speed limit is going to be 25, you're going to, at all this, when you come into town from whatever roads, you're going to have those marked?
Right.
Do we have a bogey on how much that's going to cost the town?
Well, I was talking to DPW Director Persichetti, and I estimate about 20 of those signs would be needed at all our egress points. And I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot to mention it. You would need, if the town moved this way, there would need to be signage posted as you come into Chelmsford saying, thickly settled business districts, 25 miles an hour, unless otherwise posted. Those would need to be on all roadways coming into town to give the motoring public, advisory, information. I do not know the cost of that. I know there'd be a standard speed limit sign, I think 20 or so. Maybe near some of our highway off-ramps as well, from when people get off the highway into our community, they would need to be placed. I don't have a price on that.
So could I ask, through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Persichetti, I'm looking for a WAG. Are we talking
It's
10,000?
It's
Okay.
approximately $75 to $100 a sign,
Okay,
between the post and the sign itself.
all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Elaine McDonald, Precinct 1. I really don't have a question, just more like, I'm still very confused. I understand both sides of the question, and I'm going to let everybody behind me talk because I haven't decided yet.
Okay.
Nancy Arroway, Precinct 1. I'm kind of confused by it, too. So what I think I understand is that any road that is currently posted at other than 30 miles an hour is a regulatory speed limit.
Correct.
And a regulatory speed limit requires an engineering study to evaluate what is the appropriate speed.
Correct.
Okay. This article would allow the Board of Selectmen to reset the default speed across the town from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour without having an engineering study of any of the roads.
Correct. And just to add, those roads have never had a study, the ones that are default 30 now.
Yeah, I understand. Is it the intention of this article, and is it the intention of the Board of Selectmen, and that's two different questions, to make the entire town a default statutory speed limit of 25 miles per hour?
Well, you said it's two different people, so I'll let the chief answer first and
Yeah.
then the Board of Selectmen.
My understanding is if the town meeting adopts the article, it would certainly be up to the selectmen. From the conversations I've had, I think there is an inclination to adopt it. I have not gotten a definite response as to whether it would be town-wide or neighborhood sections individual.
Okay, then the second question is...
Well, okay, you wanted the selectmen to answer that as well?
Board of Selectmen, is it your expectation to set the statutory default speed limit across all streets that are not currently posted to 25 miles per hour?
My answer to that would be, we have not had that discussion yet at the Board of Selectmen level. We voted just whether to have this as part of an option that we would have available. So we have not gone into that level of discussion. So I don't think I'm ready to answer that question at this time. I don't know if anybody else on the board is.
So we don't really know whether we're voting to reset the default speed limit to 25 miles an hour, or we're actually just voting to allow you to decide if you want to reset it to 25 miles an hour somewhere. Is that true? I mean, is that it? Okay.
I guess that would be true at some time and at some point. That
Okay.
would be the option.
Back to the police chief. If roads are currently posted at 30 miles per hour, posted, signed, would they then be considered to be a regulatory speed limit of 30 miles an hour if the Board of Selectmen sets the default speed to 25 miles per hour?
If those signs have been placed on a street that has not undergone a study, the signs should not be there, number one. They're there basically as a reminder to the motoring public and probably were put there because residents wanted them there. That being said, they should not be there. And if this is adopted, those signs would be removed and the street would become a default 25.
Okay.
That doesn't mean we could not put up advisory signs and whatnot reflecting that, but those 30 signs would be removed.
And the expectation would be that at all entries to the town, we would post the town's statutory 25-mile-an-hour speed limit to let everybody coming into town know that everywhere in Chelmsford is 25 miles an hour unless posted otherwise.
The signs I've seen in other communities around the area have been something to the effect of speed limit 25 miles an hour unless otherwise posted.
I guess that answers my question. I would have to say that I also tried the experiment of driving through town at 25 miles an hour. And I often drive through South Chelmsford Center, which the center itself is posted at 25 miles an hour, and it backs up traffic. I absolutely support safety of our roads. But the question is, what does it take to be safe, and what's a reasonable expectation of safety, and whose responsibility is it for safety? I don't want to send a message to our kids that it's okay to play in the road because it's a lower speed limit in the roads. I really, really don't want to send that message in any way. People get hurt less when they're hit by a car running at 20 miles an hour than they do at 40 miles an hour. If we use that same argument, if we slowed the speed to 5 miles an hour, they'd be hurt even more, even less. But what would happen is that we would back up, we would have gridlock, literally. If you have a mile to go to travel in a vehicle, and you're traveling at 60 miles an hour, you're on that road for 1 minute. If you're traveling at 1 mile an hour, you're on that road for 60 minutes. Now put all the rest of the cars in there that are traveling at 60 or 1 mile an hour. And those are extremes, but they kind of demonstrate the idea that the slower you go, the more traffic you have on the road at any one time. So the more we slow this down, the more traffic you're going to see backing up all over town. Given the difficulty of driving at 25 miles an hour on our country roads, I mean, Cambridge, yeah, absolutely, I get it. But it's not a natural speed for these roads. And I honestly feel that if I vote for this, I'm not going to get elected again. Because I don't think people are going to like it.
Thank you.
Dennis Sheehan, Precinct 4. First off, I'd like to say my appreciation to the police department. I think they do a wonderful job in town.
Thank you.
And secondly, yes.
Thank you.
It's a tough job, especially nowadays, and at least someone steps up to the plate and does it. Secondly, I drive an old van, so I'm not a speeder. I don't drive fast. And I know that we're all interested in safety, but my concern about this article is that good drivers driving at sane speeds are suddenly made into speeders. And it would be up to the discretion of the police department to determine whether they're going to ticket them or warn them or whatever. Not only that, a speeding ticket is not just revenue for the town, it's also costs insurance points. And I think it goes for about 5 years. So if it's a $100 ticket, this could cost you $500 or more for just exceeding the speed limit. So I would suggest that we just enforce the laws we have as they stand, and I urge the body to vote against this article. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Steve Flynn, Precinct 3. Thank you, Commissioner, for bringing this important article up. You showed the graph, and that was really hit home. Going 20 miles an hour, the 5% fatality rate is that low. Well, if I was watching television tonight, and a little 4-year-old boy ran out in the street, and he was hit by a person who basically, I understand, was going over the speed limit. Just saving that one life is so important. Did a lot of traveling over the years. You go to Bermuda, it's 20 miles per hour, 15 miles downtown. I'm a retired Goodyear tire engineer, so I studied speed all my career, okay? We'd go to the highways out to New England. If Route 3 was 55, they're doing 65, 70. If it's 65, they're doing 75, 75, 80. By bringing this down to 25, this not going to go, they might go 30. But you leave it at 30, they're going to go 40. It doesn't make sense to me why we don't look at it, because God forbid, as Mr. Diggs said, if we lose somebody, okay, then it's too late. 25 miles an hour, and when you go to a school, it's 20, and all the state roads aren't going to change. So we have a lot of state roads going through town. So that won't affect anybody. I'd look at it very carefully, ladies and gentlemen. Like I say, my kids always said to me, Dad, how come you don't go faster? Well, if you ever look at a section of a tire, it is this thick. We always kid that if we were on 495 and we had a truck, we put a metal thing in the truck, we make a day's pay by picking up all the scrap. So controlling that vehicle is so important at 20 miles an hour than controlling it at 40 miles an hour. Thank you.
Thank you.
Glenn Thorne, Precinct 5. I want to reiterate something that's been said over and over here tonight, is that I was born in Cambridge, grew up in Arlington, drive through Somerville every day, drive through Cambridge every day, and I also drive back through Carlisle and through Bedford. These are very different towns. You do not see cars lined up on the side of the road. You do not see houses with 50-foot frontage, one after another after another. As we have driven through town over the many years we've been here, 30 miles an hour has seemed relatively safe to me driving through town. And again, having conducted my experiment of trying to drive through town 4 times at 25 miles an hour, I felt uncomfortable with the cars that were stacking up behind me, waiting to see, is one of those cars going to try and pass me at 25 miles an hour? We are not Cambridge. We are not Somerville. We're not Arlington. We might be more like Bedford, a little bit like Carlisle and Billerica. These towns have not decided to drop their speed limit to 25 miles an hour yet. So while I think there's merit to consider the idea, I don't think it's right for Chelmsford, having done that experiment myself. Now, if Tewksbury and Tingsboro and Westford had all dropped to 25 miles an hour, I'd have to think about that a little bit more. But driving around this town with the space we have on the streets and the safety we have in our cars and being wide awake, I think 30 miles an hour is a very reasonable speed instead of becoming Cambridge, Somerville, or Arlington. If we pass the next article, I have a question. For these safety zones at 20 miles an hour, does the town have the ability to select areas that are at higher risk? High-density homes, maybe someplace near that has a large multifamily dwelling in it. Can we set aside those areas of town, like we do the schools, for 20 miles an hour?
Well, I can get into that, but that article, that amendment will allow us to focus more on hospitals, senior centers, parks. I have not seen any indication that you could do it because there's a housing unit.
Is there any restriction from declaring an area of town a safety zone? Are you only allowed to do it in certain areas? Or if we look at an area and say, you know, traffic's too fast in this highly residential area, now we can make it 20 miles an hour?
That's probably unlikely. The state would get final say over a safe zone. You'd need to articulate the safe zone, and the stipulations are what I just mentioned: parks, senior centers, hospitals, something unique where there's an extra level of pedestrian vulnerability. There has to be some type of nexus where there's more people, or more vulnerable people, as they call it, in a concentrated area to qualify for a safe zone.
Would lack of sidewalks and children walking on the streets be a consideration?
I do not think that would be adequate.
Okay, so I stand by my original comment. I asked the town meeting to vote this down at this time. We certainly may consider it in the future when towns besides Cambridge, Somerville, Boston, Arlington are looking at 25 mile an hour speed limits. Otherwise, I would say let's make the speed limits 20, you know, and see how that works out. And I think that's an extreme position, but it's just a little bit beyond 25. So let's keep it at 30.
Thank you.
Chris LaValle, Precinct 4. I live in a very small, compact neighborhood, no sidewalks, a lot of walkers. So actually, I want my neighborhood to be at that 20 mile an hour speed limit. But I also see the other side of there being areas in town that shouldn't be. So my questions are more around, if we vote for this, are we painting ourselves into a corner? So I have some specific questions regarding the engineering study. You mentioned that a big piece of the engineering study would be to analyze the speeds that people are currently going to see what the prevailing speed is. Is that correct?
85th percentile of safe travel. That's one of the primary factors.
So if we have already heard from a number of people here that people tend to travel over the speed limit, if the default is at a 30, it's probably unlikely that it would end up getting reduced. It would more than likely be increased because the prevailing speed limits, or the prevailing speeds, are going to be usually over that limit, correct?
You're not going to get a reduced speed limit from a study. You'd only probably get it increased.
Okay, so if we did vote to allow the Board of Selectmen to reduce this, and areas of town that shouldn't be at the 20 wanted to go through this engineering study to get it increased, that would be a possibility, correct?
Yes. It's 25, by the way. But
Okay.
anyway, yeah, if a road was deemed problematic, not fitting the mold, between the police department, DPW, and the Board of Selectmen, we would push through on analyzing that street.
But if we voted this down and did not give the Board of Selectmen that ability, and the default remained at 30, what are the options for a neighborhood like mine to get that reduced? Is it easier? Is it more difficult? Is it impossible?
It'd be extremely difficult to show that that road, 85% of the drivers safely need to drive slower than that.
So as a town, if we really want specific areas to be at a 20 to 25 mile an hour area, it would be in our best interest to approve this, let the default come down, and then have those specific studies of areas to increase it, correct?
That's an option, or the selectmen can enact this piecemeal if they wish.
Okay.
So that's, for sake of example, they could say hitching post. Hitching post part of Chelmsford will be defaulted to 25. So what that would mean is we'd have to put signage up all around hitching posts, so when people enter that area, it would say thickly settled area, 25 miles an hour. And it would just be for that.
Okay, so by approving this, we give the Board of Selectmen the opportunity to either do it blanket and be able to raise it through study, or do it piecemeal.
Correct.
By voting this down, we're essentially tying our hands and saying that we are very unable to reduce it in specific areas of town.
I believe if it's voted down, things would stay status quo.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Danielle Evans, Precinct 9. So I'm for this. And in all due deference to previous speakers at this microphone tonight, our vote on this is, one, not about getting reelected or not getting reelected. That should be the furthest thing from our minds. Second, this is about not what I personally want. This is about me representing my entire constituency and all of Precinct 9. So, because I know I'm voting for this, and I know there are going to be times I'm driving that slow and I'm going to get aggravated. I'm probably going to be late for something, and it's going to be aggravating. But the fact is, I'm here representing my whole precinct, and when I look at my neighborhood, and I live on Janet Road, you know, the end of my road is Thanksgiving Forest, it's an inlet to a huge neighborhood, and I think about all the other neighborhoods similar to mine that are in my precinct, and I think about what I see on a daily basis. Now, what I see in my neighborhood on a daily basis is people flying through my neighborhood and down my road at 40, 45. And I've paid a lot of attention to this. And it's not just teenagers, it's adults too. It's all sorts of drivers. And then you factor in, like, the cell phone and the texting along with us. No, we haven't mentioned that tonight. Okay, we're just talking about speeding. Where are we assuming everybody's, has the phone by their side? We know that's not true. I drive around town. How many people I see with a phone up here? Okay, so there's that to consider. And I see people flying down my road. And you know what about my whole neighborhood? It's great. It's a walkable neighborhood. We have conservation land you can go to. And I'm not joking with you when we have people of all ages walking and riding, kids with their scooters and people on bikes. We have horses, okay? I know maybe we're one of the few neighborhoods, but the horses come by occasionally. So we have all sorts of people, and maybe the road is wide, but the fact is you have two cars maybe in each direction, you have traffic, and then you add in all these other people out enjoying the neighborhood. You have somebody flying down at 40 or 45, that is dangerous. It's amazing to me we haven't had a casualty or a bad accident or something happen. The other thing I want people to remember is that this is about a level of respect and responsibility when you get behind the wheel of a car as a driver. You have the responsibility to be safe. And I am not seeing, from what I see driving around this community, that, whether it's people who are residents or not residents, whatever, who knows. But that there is not enough of that yet. And if this is a tool that can be used by the police department, by the Board of Selectmen, to try to make us safer overall, I see absolutely no harm in this. I mean, one of the greatest, to me, highlights of this is that I have had a child at South Row for 8 years. I'm almost done, but 8 years. So I have been in and out, dropping off, picking up during the times, but I drive back and through that school zone all day long. And the amount of times, and it tends to happen more at drop-off and pick-up where it's really obvious there's a school right there because the school buses and the cars, but the amount of time I have had people behind me honking, tailing me. I can tell swearing at me, like making obscene gestures, okay? And I literally now, I point this way, like, hello, there's a school there. There are school buses. Slow down. You need to slow down. And the fact is, I love the police, okay? You're great. And I wish we could give you enough money that you could have a cop at every single school and every single school zone controlling that every single day. But the fact is, we don't have those resources. We can't have them. And the police are there as much as they can. And it's great. It's a highlight of my day if I see somebody pulled over there. But it really is, because I'm sick of people tailing me and honking at me, and people have to learn to slow down. It's their responsibility as a driver. And I'm sorry, but if us sending the message, and in these neighborhoods, reducing down to 25 is going to help send that message to our young new drivers and to our older drivers that you need to slow down and be safe, and this is human life, and this is important, then I really see absolutely no harm in this at all. And you know what? I have a kid that's going to be 13 soon. Yeah, I'm getting close to that, driver's ed thing. It scares the bejesus out of me. But I would love to be able to say to him, guess what? It's 25. And if you don't stick to it, give me the car keys. You're done. And I'm glad you got the ticket because you need to learn. And I would love to have that reinforcement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chicky Regazio, Precinct 7. I just want to make a kind of an observation. A year ago, in the summer, I was on Brentwood Road going to Drum Hill. And no, I was coming back from Drum Hill. And the sun shining in the windshield. I did not see the policeman. I did not see the cruiser. He saw me. And he stopped me, and he said, do you know you were doing 35 miles an hour in a 30 zone? And I said, no, I thought it was 35 miles an hour. I had no clue. I sometimes am a clueless wonder. But anyway, he educated me. And after that, I look at the signs. Every place I am in town, including South Chelmsford at 25. And I watch what I'm doing. Fast forward to Election Day in April. That policeman was on duty in the polls. And I went up to him and I said, you may not remember me, but I'm the ditzy lady on Brentwood Road that you stopped. And I said, I want to thank you for that because you made me aware of what's going on in town as far as speed limits are concerned. And he said, well, that's my job. My job is not to give out tickets, it's to educate. And I think that's a big part of this, is people need to be educated. They need to be reminded, like I was. And I tell people now, when, my friends that be careful because it's 30 miles an hour in town. The other thing is, please tell the bus companies that it's speed limit. Because those buses fly. I live on Clover Hill Drive, and I gotta tell you, they do 40, 45 miles an hour down the street. It's scary. So the bus company needs to know that there are speed limits. Thank you.
Thank you, and I can just respond to that by saying that we have special deployments directed solely at the buses. We do watch them as best we can. We have arrangements, and Officer Leo in the back is one of the officers that participates in the program, where we watch the buses for speed violations. So it's something we're going to try to work on and improve, but you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Caitlin McCabe, Precinct 3. I have to say that initially on its face, I was not in favor of this. I'm a mother of 3, I work in Cambridge. It's all I can do to get people to put shoes on, let alone be anywhere in time. So I'm with you, Joe, wherever you are, previous speaker. I tend to drive a little faster than I should, but when I heard someone state that we should not be telling our kids to play in the street, that's where I changed my mind. I am for this. We live in Chelmsford, where this is about our neighborhoods. It's not really about the main roads. It's about the neighborhoods where there are no sidewalks. There are kids walking to bus stops on main roads with no sidewalks. And guess what? A lot of us live on hills. The kids have to play in the street. That's where they ride their scooters, their bikes. That's where they shoot hoops. I don't want people blazing up my street at 35 miles an hour, and it happens. So I am in favor of this.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, Doug Bruce, Precinct 9. I just have one question for the chief and a brief comment afterwards. Chief, some of us might be thinking of several high-profile, tragic pedestrian accidents that have happened recently in Chelmsford. One at the Route 3 southbound exit at Drum Hill, and the other at the Eastgate Plaza. Would those two areas be covered by this statute?
No, they're state roads. They would stay as is.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. And as an engineer, I try and make decisions with data. So I tried to learn a little bit more about this issue and find some data on this. And I came across a report from the U.S. Department of Transportation titled Effect of Raising and Lowering Speed Limits. And I just want to read into the record a couple of their findings. This is from the summary of findings. Lowering speed limits by 5, 10, 15, or 20 miles per hour at the study sites had a minor effect on vehicle speeds. Posting lower speed limits does not decrease motorists' speeds. Conversely, raising speed limits by 5, 10, 15 miles per hour at the rural and urban sites had a minor effect on vehicle speeds. In other words, an increase in the posted speed limit did not create a corresponding increase in vehicle speeds. That's from a study commissioned by the Federal Department of Transportation. Just keep that in mind as we consider this issue.
Mr. Moderator, please. I have a response to data on that? Or?
Would you?
Oh, absolutely.
I've read the same study, and I also read other studies that said you are exactly right, but when you add in consistent enforcement along with prolonged information and education, the speeds will come down.
All right, thank you.
This is not a silver bullet, folks. It is not a solve-all. It's a philosophy. It's a retraining.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sue Dander, Precinct 9. Quick question with respect to everyone's time. I may have missed this, but we're staring at a 25 posted speed limit. How is that established?
So the Chelmsford made a unique request to the state because of this uniquely set up business district. You're absolutely right. It must have fallen under a stipulation where the state allowed it because of the density, the way the roadways are set up. Probably once upon a time, the way the center was set up, where it was less than advantageous to drive through, the state allowed the speed limit to come down to 25. I would assume the same thing happened with Proctor Road back in the early 70s. They allowed it to come down because of the curvature and the narrowness of the roadway. You're just not seeing it today.
So I can't tell from the picture. Can you just explain where
That is Chelmsford Street coming into the business district of the center. That's near Dr. Sargent's dentist office on the left.
That's
Yep, the
110.
laundromat's right there.
That's right in front of the laundromat. So that's a state-owned road,
Right, so
correct?
my assumption is that Chelmsford made a special petition to the state through the DOT. They don't never not allow this. You have to just articulate why you have some type of exemption that would allow a special speed regulatory sign to be established on a state road.
So we had the petition on a state road, but also on Proctor Road, which I assume is not a state road?
And that happened long, long ago. It was probably, the road was probably so narrow, and because of the sharp curves, the state allowed it.
Okay. I know it's a long time ago, do you have any idea how long the petition process is?
90 days or so, something like that.
So is there any other process within the town's power to get a 25 speed limit posted?
Without going to this amendment?
Exactly. If this amendment is voted down,
Yep.
and our statutory default stays at 30, is there any process to get certain roads to 25?
It would have to fall into such extreme measure that I'm not aware of for the state to allow it. Because the state has basically said 30 is acceptable under the statutory zoning,
Okay.
under the old law of 9017.
Okay.
So I don't get the impression that they'd be willing to make case-by-case modifications. They want to see towns take it under their own umbrella to change it.
Okay. But not unheard of, and I'd be curious of what other towns, as we all drive around, have 25 posted speed limits.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy Arroway, Precinct 1. I've been working in regulatory engineering and laws and regulations for a long time. And this one was really confusing me, and I finally went back and picked it apart word at a time. So I'm looking at the article itself, and it gives the Board of Selectmen the ability to establish a default 25 miles an hour in any thickly settled or business district, not across town, but only in those areas that are thickly settled or business.
Yeah, that has been discussed several times
Right.
during the discussion, so
Okay.
I don't think we have to rehash it again.
Okay.
I understand.
So I thank you for the slide that talks about thickly settled, because it gives a definition. And under that definition, it would apply, for instance, in the Westlands, but probably not apply in virtually any of our residential 1 districts. So places like High Street and Robert Hill Road and Turnpike, you couldn't apply it to because it wouldn't meet this average less than 200 feet apart. In terms of business districts, I'm curious about what constitutes a business district. Is it an area that is zoned commercial? Is it an area that is being used as commercial? Or is it any area that has non-conforming commercial uses in it?
That's a question directed.
Well, under 90, Section 1, the state just defines it as a thickly settled business district, a territory contiguous to any way which has built up with structures devoted to business.
So if we had an area that was, for instance, a residential 1, but it had commercial, non-conforming commercial pre-existing, you could deem it as a business district and apply this?
I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, Ginger Skoog, Precinct 6. I live at the top of Dalton Road, right where it hits Brentwood and Skyview and Westford Street. And I am the mom standing out at the bus stop there, waving my fist at people who run the stop sign, who come down that hill from coming across town and who run past the bus stop that is there. The speed limit on that road is 30. I challenge any of you to tell me that you actually drive 30 down that hill. My concern is that, like the previous speaker who said she thought it was 35, and I hear that a lot when I talk to people, and I didn't know it was 30 on that road until we started living there because I had always lived on North Road. This is about giving our town flexibility in being able to designate residential places that will allow us to lower the speed limit where it's appropriate, and if necessary, raise it with the right information to an appropriate speed limit. Please consider this, because as they've clarified, it's a lot harder to get speed limits lowered in these thickly settled areas, in areas where we know we need people to slow down, than it is to run a study, get our 85%, go through our 90 days, spend a small amount of money to appropriately speed areas in town that should be 30 or 35 miles an hour. Please, please consider what the administrative effect of not putting this in will have on us being able to make our town roads safe for our kids, safe for our bus stops, safe for people walking who want to enjoy the benefits that this town gives us of being a small town, of being a close-knit town, and of being a safe town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Johanna Shaw, Precinct 9. I want to thank the members of this body who took the initiative to run experiments on driving through the town at 25. But I want to point out there's a slight flaw in those who reported that they were getting lines of cars behind them. Right now, they're driving through at 25 to test it while the posted speed limit or default speed limit is 30. So that means they're driving at 16% below the actual speed limit, and I've got to admit, if I was behind them at that point, I would have been right on their bumper too, getting really annoyed. So the reporting back that people were lining up is a little bit of a flaw there because it's not testing with the actual speed limit being 25.
Thank you.
Glenn Thorne, Precinct 8. Mr. Moderator, through you to the chief. First, I want to say thank you for the job that you're doing in town and all the policemen. I think that we can all have a consensus on that. I have a question about some of the smaller side roads in Chelmsford that are posted with a yellow 20-mile-an-hour sign. Are those results of an engineering study that have been done?
No, those are advisory signs, usually through collaboration between the police department, DPW, and residents' concerns. We'll put those signs in place to advise people that maybe there's a sharp corner coming, they need to reduce their speeds. It is not enforceable.
Okay.
It is basically a heads up, there's a change in the road coming ahead. It's a good idea to slow down, especially if you're not familiar with the area.
Okay. So those being marked as a 20, would they be affected by this? Would it be, is it enforceable at 30 miles an hour currently, and it would be enforceable at 25 in the future if this were to pass?
So those signs are not enforceable, period.
Okay, so the yellow ones are not?
No, they're strictly
So the
advisory.
rule of thumb in those areas would be 30 currently, if it's thickly settled, for example, and then would go to a 25?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And that sign would stay.
Thank you.
Deputy Precinct 6. I'm having a difficult time with this question because I've thought about it before now. I live on Stedman Street.
Can you speak in the microphone a little bit better, Deb?
Okay. I live on Stedman Street. I live the sixth house up from the corner of the intersection of Golden Cove and Chelmsford Street. There is a speed limit sign on the telephone pole in front of my home of 30 miles an hour. I don't recall the last time I've really seen a car drive 30 miles an hour in front of my house. So I have a difficult time with this particular question. It's either they fly through the intersection and stop. They'll go as fast as they can to make that light. I did get hit one time in front of my own home. They estimated that the speed that I was hit was at 45 miles an hour. I still have a bone sticking out of my wrist because I was going into that telephone pole with the 30 miles an hour, and they pushed my car into the driveway next door to me. It was a clear road. Little girl that used to come to my home, Sydney Moores. We're all pretty familiar with the Westlands Park and back of the Westlands School. She got hit in front of my home around dinner time, crossing the street. So as I stand before you, I know there's parts in town I don't drive fast. I do try to keep to the speed limit. And the people that drive on my street do not drive the speed limit. It's 3:30 in the morning, coming from Lowell Way, because I'm usually up at that time. My house shakes because of the trucks that use Stedman Street, because they're not allowed in North Road. In order to get to 495 and Golden Cove, they come down Stedman Street. So we get the freight trucks, we get big machinery trucks, and they don't drive 30 miles an hour. We're very fortunate that we have a sidewalk on my side of the street. I know on Dalton Road, they don't drive 30 miles an hour either. Of course, that's from Chelmsford Street to Dalton Road. So I'm surrounded by a lot of traffic. Either the traffic is stopped, or the traffic, they halt. It's either one or the other. And I do live on a street where cars have gone into homes 2 houses down, they had gone into a house across from me. They had gone right into the house. I've seen an awful lot of accidents in my day. I've been there 42 years, and we had many. And I'm sure you could testify to that. With that street, that area, with that, do you feel for 25 miles an hour?
Stedman Street would be one of the roads that would change. And the desire, again, through long-term information, education, and enforcement, just like we do now, the speeds would come down. There's going to still be people that speed.
Well,
But
I
the
realize
hope
that.
would be the majority, and it is now, the majority of the motoring public will behave appropriate.
Well, that's the point. If it's not enforced, it's very difficult.
But I don't know where this word keeps coming of not enforced. We enforce the speed laws to our full capacity. This community, we need to understand, is a call, we are a call reactive police department. We have 34,000 calls last year. I typically have 5 or 6 officers patrolling the entire town at once. So when the officers patrol their sectors, they do the best they can to hit problematic areas. It's never going to be enough. I wish I had 10 more traffic units out there, but like one of the speakers said, we don't have those resources and we never will. But we'll continue to do the best we can, and if the speed limits come down, we'll continue in the same format. And hopefully the public would voluntarily comply and the speeds would come down.
I would also like to add at this stage, I know this, well, indirectly, I have discovered lately that at the bottom of Stedman, if you want to go onto Chelmsford Street and or Golden Cove or whatever, they're forming 2 lines. They did that years ago when Wang used to be open. And I absolutely refuse to put my car closer to that double line. And there's a reason for that, because I've almost got hit many times. So I stay to the right. I really think we need a sign that states, as it does on Chelmsford Street, this is a single lane. It's not a double lane. It's single. We're getting cars now going 2 up, and that's dangerous.
Ms. Derry, you've exceeded your 5 minutes.
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
That's
sorry,
okay,
John.
but I mean...
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Badriu Kleppen, Precinct 5. Mr. Moderator, through you to the Speaker. According to the slide 215, which shows the vehicle impact, speed, and pedestrian injury severity, and being an engineer, I'm doing some extrapolation here. So the 25 miles per hour speed limit, the fatality percentage would still be upwards of about 22%. I'm just drawing a straight line between 3 points and saying that with a 25 miles per hour, the fatality rate would be 22.5. As a previous speaker noted, maybe 20, or somebody said, why not 20? It's just beyond. In fact, I like that suggestion very much, because that fatality rate is now at 5%, giving me a 95% reduction or a chance of not, killing somebody by that rate. Would you, and the other comments that you made, Chief, is that it is about a sort of a psychological thing, or a long-term education is the better approach and deterrent to fatalities, or managing overspeeding, basically. Would you, is that a statistical study database across the country that says that doing long-term education enforcement helps drivers learn that behavior?
The studies that I read show more of a 3-pronged approach. Consistent enforcement with education and information, with voluntary compliance should result.
And I think when you say enforcement, that means, whether it be a warning or a ticket, it doesn't matter, it's an enforcement.
Stop the violation, regardless of the outcome, you're stopping the violation.
People are thinking maybe enforcement equal to ticket and warning means.
I think it's
get
been
it.
made very clear that that's not what it means in this
I agree,
context.
but I still get, when people are saying it's not being enforced.
Well, I think that these people understand.
So in terms, if you were to, wherever you can enforce, say at a street like Stedman Street or other places which are more prone to having traffic that cross-links major roads or segments, if you enforced more in those sections as is feasible, do you think that based on the general statistics that the overspeeding will come down there? As a mix of two factors, right, as an experimentation.
I would just like to think that once it was implemented and we moved forward, more or less the word would get out that Chelmsford recognizes this speed limit, and then people would adjust their behavior.
Okay. I think, for now at least, my vote would be to improve enforcement in the areas that matter as much. And I'm not saying that this cannot be reintroduced at the fall town meeting or not in next year. But let us take that first step to see if that works within Chelmsford. Because if we are giving 7 out of 10 or our warnings and we are giving a percentage, I don't know the number of percentage of tickets, that warning or actual fines that are given to in-city or in-town people versus out-town people. But just doing that study might help us gain a little bit more Chelmsfordian data, if at all, and that might help us understand it better. It's also very much possible that if we do, vote it, that the Board of Selectmen would constitute more studies that may happen at a future date. We are giving them the right to do so, but I think a lot of people would like to see that behavioral change, or at least some trend analysis for ourselves, just a bit, and then to go for that. I think it's just data-driven. Thanks.
Thank you.
Diane Baxter, Precinct 4. I just wanted to ask sort of a clarifying question. I think a previous speaker came up and talked about thickly settled districts, and I believe made the statement that this wouldn't apply to our neighborhoods. And I thought that was really the opposite, that most of our neighborhoods would fit within that 200-foot classification. So I'm just wondering, did you look at the town as a whole and get a sense of, does this apply to most of our neighborhoods?
I think it applies to almost every neighborhood.
Okay.
I've driven through this town for 24 years. It's all of our neighborhoods that are on secondary roadways fall well within the average 200 feet in between dwellings for a quarter of a mile.
Okay, that was my thought, too.
I think that's without a doubt.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Clancy, Precinct 2. I'd like to move the question.
We have a motion to move the question. Okay, can we have a screen to move the question? This requires a 2/3 vote. If you vote in favor of this, it terminates all the questions and answers and debates, and we then vote on the article. We are not voting on the article now. We are only voting on to terminate discussion and debate.
It's certainly an indication that town meeting reps are ready to move on when a motion to move the question is greeted with applause.
The motion passes 114 in favor, 8 opposed, no abstentions. So now we will be voting on Article 23, which would allow the Board of Selectmen to establish a speed limit of 25 miles per hour in any thickly settled or business district which is not a state highway. This requires a majority vote. Please vote now.
Could be a very close vote on this.
I'm reminded of George Carlin's comment that anybody who drives slower than you is an idiot, and anybody who drives faster than you is a maniac. So keep that in mind. The article fails. 55 in favor, 65 opposed, 2 abstentions.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to end the way I began. I want you to know your department, your police department is here to work with you. I take no personal on any of this. We're going to continue to do the best we can with the resources we have. And I want to further remind you that my email is on the town website. Any issues at all in your neighborhoods, quality of life is our #1 priority in town. I have a division devoted entirely just to that, whether it's noise, traffic, etc. Shoot me an email. You'll have an officer at your door in a day or two. Thank you very much. You know, you're supposed to leave on a high note, folks, and I just blew it.
Okay, so now we're going to be addressing Article 24.
The manager got me. So Article 24 is regards to safe zones. Now, safe zones, we're talking about a much more finite set of circumstances here. Like I said earlier, it's going to be specific to a park, something like that. Think of it as a school zone for a park. That's really the best way I can explain it. Used to be okay. So, what is the process for establishing a safety zone speed limit? Safety zone speed limits are the only regulatory speed limits that municipalities can adopt without prior approval from Mass DOT. Safety zones cannot, however, be placed on state highways without their approval. Speed limits within a safety zone must be set at 20 miles an hour and intended to be used in areas where vulnerable road users are likely to be present. Examples: parks, playgrounds, senior citizen housings, etc., hospitals, medical facilities. To establish a safe zone, Mass DOT has developed the following minimum criteria: quarter of a mile, and this chart is in the wrong location, quarter of a mile, and that's it. So the perfect example I keep using is Harmony Park. I consider Carlisle Street in that section, it's on a curve, so we would post most likely a yellow advisory or whatever would be approved by DOT, speed limit sign. You could even go with a flashing light if you so choose, warning the motoring public that they are approaching a park or playground. And that would be for at least a quarter of a mile. And then it ends. So there's no guessing, there's no trickery. It's a designated speed zone because of that unique environment where there's vulnerable pedestrians. That's really all I have to say about speed zones.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends against approval of Article 24.
And do the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation?
Board of Selectmen recommends approval by a vote of 4 to 1.
Okay. So now we are in discussion and questions and answers.
Glenn Thorne, Precinct 5. I'm not even going to ask the Finance Committee because I think this is a good idea. You know, when I see the lights flashing around schools, you know, I immediately slow down on Saturdays and Sundays. You know, even though there are no students here, it's an automatic thing. So if we have the ability to post areas where people are expected to be crossing the streets, children are playing, you know, there's a higher likelihood of a baseball rolling out in front of you, then I think we should have the ability to set those speed limits in all those areas, in the parks, and there are a lot around town. Some places you don't even know there's a park. And we're looking at possibly creating some other areas in town that are parks. So, well, we had a slight disagreement. Thank you for not holding it against me, Chief. On the last article, I couldn't be more supportive of this article. It's something I think we should be able to do, and if we pass this article, we will be. Thank you.
Thank you.
David Rand, Precinct 2. This looks like a great idea, but without speed bumps, you know, people are distracted and everything else. I don't think it's going to be that effective.
Well, if you're asking me, if making a question out of it, we don't have speed bumps in front of the schools. I think, like the last speaker said, a flashing warning type sign is completely appropriate. It would be a high priority for us for those zones, just like school zones are. Speed bumps are problematic because we live in New England. It is tough for the DPW to maneuver through that type of road obstacle. But again, I think we would go out of our way to make this signage quite noticeable.
Well, we have speed bumps in the center, and DPW seems to be able to handle those.
Crosswalks.
Mr. Moderator, John Souza, 88 Carlisle Street, town resident. I'm here to support this effort for safety speed zones. The chief mentioned earlier about Harmony Park. I can tell you I've lived in that area of town for over 50 years. Carlisle Street's a very busy street if you're not familiar with it. There is a park and a playground on it. There's a sharp curve right there, a very sharp curve. One of the neighbors has a home with a stone wall. It's been hit many times by vehicle accidents. I urge the body to support this motion. I can tell you that there are no sidewalks in that area of town, and it would greatly enhance safety. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis Sheehan, Precinct 4. I've got a couple questions. So this zone would be a quarter mile long? Is that what it is? If you have one of these zones, it's a quarter mile long?
Yes.
Okay. Will these things be flashing day and night, like at midnight? Am I going to slow down 20 miles an hour to go on my
There's
turn?
really no ruling on that. That would be something whatever the town would think would be best. Our school lights don't flash. There's usually a time frame there. I really can't answer the question. I have not put a lot of effort.
The school lights tend to flash on weekends and holidays, and they do seem to flash at times when they're not really.
No, they really shouldn't be. So
Okay.
we could certainly get the word out.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Pat Magnell, Precinct 8. Mr. Moderator, through you to the speaker or to the members of the boards, I am struck by the difference between the opinion of the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen. And if someone could very succinctly describe their rationale for the positions they took.
Are you polling us, or do you want just a general response?
Well, since you were unanimous, a general response.
Okay, certainly. We took this article in order from 23 to 24. A majority of the Finance Committee supported Article 23, which would lower the average speed in town, the regulatory speed in town to 25. We then took Article 24 and looked at the rationale behind it and said that another further drop is an unnecessary added regulation. There are also additional costs associated with this where there weren't additional costs, not significant additional costs with the other article. The costs that we were concerned about were the additional traffic calming measures such as flashing lights, speed bumps, stuff of that nature, and that's why we voted the way we voted on that one. However, I may be inclined to at least personally to change my position on this, given the fact that the body has voted down the previous article.
And is there any other member of the Finance Committee that has a sort of a divergent view upon their answer?
Not divergent, but I'm going to change my vote. I would have changed my vote based on the fact that the last one.
Okay. What sort of cost would there be? Do you have any rough idea associated with this?
It would be similar to the price of the other signage, $100 a sign, something to that effect. And if the town elected to go with a light, or there's a recommendation for a lighting signal, that would be more.
Okay. And as far as the Board of Selectmen, what's the rationale behind your majority?
From what I recall, it would be similar to what we explained is for the other article. This one is more specific, so we'd have a little bit more discretion as to where it would be implemented.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very useful information.
Thank you.
Beth Logan, Precinct 3. I've never had to raise the microphone. I want a clarification on this, because up there it says that the street needs to be adjacent to the land use. And so I'm kind of in my brain running around town, and I'm thinking, like, I don't have to worry about the one-off vinyl square because those softball fields are way down there. But like Roberts Field, there's 2 parking areas before you get there. Does that count as adjacent land, or is the parking area considered a buffer? And
I think the state would be very forgiving with a town petitioning for a safety zone. I do not think they would split hairs on this. If we petitioned the state that we wanted Roberts Field, even though it has plenty of frontage, I would be really surprised if something like that was rejected.
So wait a minute, now I'm really confused. So you're saying we would slow down at Roberts Field or not?
If we decided to make that a safe zone, I don't see that being rejected. I thought your
So-
point was because the parking lot comes so far forward of the park.
Yeah, see, to me, that park's protected by the parking lot. That's why I'm trying to understand which ones kind of would or wouldn't, or would it then be up to the Board of Selectmen to pick which ones would and wouldn't, like the
We can-
softball field right on Chelmsford Road? So I'm trying to run through my mind, are we talking about all of them? Are we gonna pick
I
and
have heard no
choose?
discussions like that. Whatever ones we did want to do, it has to be a report with a study submitted to the state articulating why that area is sensitive, whether it's the way the land is set up, the park is extremely close to the roadway. We would have to articulate all that, and the state would give final approval.
So where you see a problem like Harmony Park, we could then make the petition, but where we see no problem, like let's say we haven't had any at Roberts Field, we wouldn't go through the effort in those cases. And I'm not saying, I don't know if there's a problem at Roberts Park, I'm just trying to get an example.
Right, I use Harmony Park as an example because of its proximity to Carlisle Street and the fact that it's on a corner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Frances McDougall, Precinct 1. One of the members was kind enough today, and I may be very out of order now, but since I am on the sign committee, brought in a photo of our now signed center. And I would like to go on record, and I know it has nothing to do with this maybe. This is appalling.
Okay, Ms.
Appalling.
McDougall.
I know, all right, I will sit down.
Sorry,
Appalling.
sorry.
Kenneth Pantuso, Precinct 2. I just wanted to clarify, this would be pertaining to Varney Park in that area as well, or not?
I think you can make the case why that area should be reduced.
Okay, awesome. I'm part of the Vinyl Square Master Plan Committee. I hear a lot from the subcommittee of Varney Park. These are the same people that voted me in. To town meeting rep, and I feel obligated to kind of come up here and speak on behalf of them. A lot of them voiced their opinions on, us needing signage and slowing people down because whether it be out-of-towners or not, a lot of people speed frequently around Varney Park. So this would be a huge help and a huge win for us. So please vote in support of this. And I kind of should assume we were all kind of at the same page. So I vote to move the question. If
No,
that's
you
possible.
can't do that. You argued, so you cannot,
Okay.
you
All
cannot
right,
move the question.
This is first town meeting, so I'm learning.
That's
Thank you.
okay. My pleasure to educate you.
Brian Latina, Precinct 4. So I can't ask a question after I start debate? Is that?
No, you can't move the question
Okay, good.
after you've asked questions or argued.
Right. The area around the center with those bright yellow fluorescent signs, there's 30 of them there. Is that area, would that area fall into this kind of category, and could we remove those horrible-looking signs?
I think you might be asking the wrong town official.
But I'm saying, that's a park? Would you consider that a park to go to?
Those signage might be the new requirements for crosswalks. I do not know that for sure, but my understanding is, though, the way that signage is now, they're going up on every crosswalk as an additional advisory warning to motorists.
Okay. And is that maybe it's a question for a town manager or someone in facilities or DPW, is that a state road that goes around the library?
I
Or
believe
is
it's
that
Bartlett,
one
it's
of-
actually Bartlett Street. It's a very strange setup, actually, but no, it's not.
That's a town
Yep.
road. So in theory, if those aren't state signs, we could take them down.
No. I think it's a mandate for crosswalks now.
That's all right. Those signs are required in the MUTCD, which is the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices at a crosswalk. You need signage and then advanced warning signage.
That color.
They don't have to be that color. They can be standard yellow or fluorescent yellow.
On each end?
Get both sides, pointing down, and then advanced warning signs.
And this regulation, we're looking to do 20 miles per hour in these areas. tend to put those kind of signs on each area that, like that?
Well, I mean, I don't want to step on the chief's toes, but I believe there'd be a regulatory sign, so it'd be a white speed limit sign, and there'd probably be an advanced sign in front of that indicating that, you know, like a school zone. There's a school zone ahead sign, and then there's a 20-mile-an-hour sign at the school zone. I envision this being the same type of thing.
Okay, and if I could ask the chief, and little latitude here, crosswalk signs with the high-density flashing signs at 10 feet at a crosswalk.
I don't think that's mandated. We have the bike path signage as a lighted sign. I'm not sure if that's an absolute requirement. I don't believe so, because if it was, we'd have them on all the.
And Mr. Moderator, to the chief, the crosswalk signs or the bike path signs with the high-density flashing, as a human factors perspective, shouldn't they be where the bike is rather than 10 feet?
Okay,
up?
Mr. Latina, I mean, you've asked a few questions on this.
That's why I was asking, just asking from a point of view of safety zones, if we put lights here.
These aren't considered the safety zones. I never heard the bike path mentioned as one of the areas. It's parks, it's hospitals,
But
it's
I heard
senior centers.
flashing light, we were talking about flashing lights.
No, we're talking about safety zones.
We were talking about flashing lights.
Now,
at the
Mr.
safety-
Latina, it's a quarter-mile safety zone. It's not flashing lights. There are flashing lights to designate the safety zone, but we're talking about safety zones. We're not talking about crossing from the bike path or crosswalks,
But
okay?
there will be a flashing light to indicate the safety zone.
No, I made the comment the town could move that way if so desired. There's no mandate for any type of
That's
illumination.
fine, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions? There being none, we shall now vote on Article 24, which would allow the Board of Selectmen to establish safety zones with a speed limit of 20 miles per hour.
This was an interesting change of perspective. Had the prior article passed, this one perhaps would have had a little bit more divided support. But given that for the time being anyway, the standard speed limit within town will be remaining at 30 miles an hour, I think there is an eagerness to make the safe zones a nice.
The article passes
safe
112
speed.
in
We're
favor,
about done
11
here.
opposed. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn town. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. See you in the fall.
One of the things I learned this evening from seeing the great variety of town meeting reps who came to the microphone who I've never seen speak before is that everyone has a story about speeding or not speeding or what they personally do or having people honk at them going through crosswalks, whatever. I'm sure that the town moderator and chief of police expected a lot of debate on these two warrant articles having to do with reducing the speed limit in town. And if that was their expectation, they certainly got it. Something that everyone feels they have a level of experience to weigh in on. And so we got that. There must have been 30 different town meeting reps come up to speak for or against the article about lowering the statutory speed limit in town. I give Chief Spinney a lot of credit for coming forward with this. It was defeated, but not by much. So it's conceivable that after there's more discussion within town, within the different precincts and such, I wouldn't be surprised to see this article come back again, maybe not in the fall, but in the future. In any case, that brings to a close our 29 article town meeting warrant, 4 sessions, roughly 12 hours put in on all of that to get to where we are now, and we will adjourn until the fall. And those dates have already been set in October. We look forward to seeing you then, if not sooner. So thank you from Chelmsford Telemedia for watching our broadcast. Thanks again to our staff and terrific volunteers. Good night.